Yes, yes, y'all. You know what it means. It's Saturday night. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Therefore, the new Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze, man. I want to thank everyone who participated in last week's conversation. Even though some folks got long-winded, and I had to point it out, and some other panelists chimed in and pointed out as well. It was really a good conversation. We only got through the first two topics last week. Hopefully, we get a little further, but these first few topics might be too good. It depends on who's with us tonight. Speaking of that, shout out to Buana. Buana is celebrating a birthday this weekend, so happy birthday to him. He won't be present tonight, but hopefully some of you guys who usually just stay in the chat, maybe one or two of y'all will call in and join the panel tonight and help us have a full cast. You know the deal, I like to come on here and I like to let you guys know what conversations we plan to have tonight. We're going to talk about how social media platforms were pressured to silence grassroots movements. That's important around these parts. We're going to also look at how Google is just a shadow State Department. You guys might have an idea where I got these clips from. We're going to look at and try to answer this question. These next three are from last week. Why crowds choose lies over truth, according to Plato. So we're going to talk a little Plato tonight. We're going to talk about this content creator. We discussed it here on Shoot the Breeze sometime back. The idea that African time, in African time is cyclical. And many people, I guess, attacked her perspective when we had the conversation. But recently, if you pay attention to science news, you would know that scientists recently came on and said, looks like time's circular. So we'll talk about it. We're going to talk about Halo Braid, the first robotic hair braiding robot. That's an interesting one. We're going to talk about those things tonight, man. I'm going to start the show officially. And on the other side, I'm going to drop Shoot the Breeze topic number one, as well as introduce any and all of my panelists. Oh, shout out to Chuckwu. You know, Chuckwu, in my haste, I mistaken you, and I think it was you who said hello in the chat, and I think I may have mistaken you for Sister Cheryl's husband. So I apologize to all parties for that mistake. But shout out to Chuckwu. Thanks for being in the chat, man. I'm guessing you guys can hear my voice, but if you can, just drop a 1 for me. Let me know that you can hear my voice. Like I said, we're going to start the show officially. Shout out to the matron in the chat as well. We're going to start the show officially. And on the other side, I'll introduce any and all panelists as well as drop Shoot the Breeze topic number one. So do stay tuned. In the meantime, like the show, share it with your people, share it on social media, tag me in the post, and stay tuned.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Just want to remind you guys before we get the show rolling that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network you are invited to tune into.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed, man. Make sure you're also tuned in to Brother Bakari's BBN Network. Make sure you're tuned into the Forecast Radio. Make sure you're tuned into Considerate Cheek / Realm in the Bush. She's off in the continent right now. You tune in and see where she is and what she's doing. And last but not least, make sure you're tuned in to Kofi, the Black Critic. You know, just a quick reminder, because oftentimes I forget to bring it up, but we're still looking for other memberships. As you know, some folks aren't active, some folks have disappeared, so we will be good in these types of conversations as well that we have on Shoot the Breeze. All right, so like I said, short staff tonight. Right now it's just me, but again, if you would like to, you can click the link and join the panel tonight. Help the conversations go forward. In the meantime, it's just me, so I'll just do it alone. Shoot the Breeze. Topic number 1 says, Shoot the Breeze topic number 1 says, social media platforms pressured to silence grassroots movements after 2016. Now, I already know some people will say, well, we already knew this. Well, a lot of what we knew was what we figured out, and what later was redacted files from like COINTELPRO, this, that, and the other. But this is, and so we were able to kind of put together what must be going on, with social media and what they call shadow banning and all this type of stuff. And of course, not letting messages like Pan-Africanism and whatnot get out there, get too big. But this is the inside telling you what's going on the inside. And I thought this was so interesting a conversation. I hope you guys find it interesting as well. We're going to get into it right now. We're going to watch the video and then we'll discuss.
Well, you said right around late 2017, things changed in terms of searching. There was the Trust Project, and then there was Google's OWL Project.
Yeah.
Where instead of independent news being pinned to the top, the big media outlets would automatically be pinned to the top of these search results. So explain that.
Yeah. So what Google did after the 2016 election was they initiated this Project OWL, this authoritative sources re-ranking mechanism for Google and YouTube in order to end the democratization, effectively, the fair fight, the neutral search term dogfight that happens when you are searching by a keyword. So everything works. Google is monetized through essentially words. Companies bid on words for Google Ads. That's the lion's share of the revenue. And before early 2017, the way it would work is what's on the top of Google were things like how frequently are you cited by other sources. So you could have a blog from a totally random no-name website that's number one on Google because it's just a really well-written article that is referenced so many times by so many other websites. It's got a certain length, so time on page, so Google can run, ads and sponsored content, on that as well. And so it was a kind of fair fight on the internet before that. But what happened is 2016 was this year of kind of unprecedented political turbulence in the post-Cold War history of America. The Brexit referendum happened in the summer of 2016, which was something that was powered by basically little people on the internet against big media, big government, big industry. You had the election of Donald Trump in 2016, which, this is basically the twin towers falling of political events. This is the UK and US, the transatlantic hegemons of Western power. Both of their effectively governance structures were completely reorganized simply because of free speech on the internet. And all of, I use this term, the blob. It's not my term. This was Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes's term to describe this immovable, unstoppable force within Washington, which appeared to have more power than the White House itself. This was Obama's White House, which would use this term. It comes from that 1950s movie about this kind of, alien purple blob that just absorbs everything in its path. And it represents these kind of permanent Washington, D.C. creatures, this kind of donor, drafter, financial, multinational corporation overclass, and the spawn of NGOs and trade associations and civil society groups underneath it. But all of their interests were considered badly threatened by free speech on the internet, having the ability to circumvent mainstream media as a gatekeeper for ascendancy in politics. You really only had a Coke and Pepsi choice before this. Trump didn't just defeat Hillary Clinton in 2016. He defeated Jeb Bush. He took down the dynasties on both sides of the aisle. And this was something that was spreading around the world very, very fast. You had Bolsonaro in Brazil who came to power. They called him the Trump of the tropics. Again, hated by mainstream media in Brazil, hated by Globo, the biggest media platform in Brazil. You had Marine Le Pen rising in France. You had the AfD party rising in Germany, the Vox party in Spain, the Brexit movement in the UK, the Five Star movement in Italy. You had the Philippines election going the wrong way because of Facebook. And so all around the world, you had this banking class, this chamber of commerce, multinational corporation class having their interests being badly damaged by essentially people who were popular on social media rising to political power. And so what they did, the blob, this set of institutional players, is they got Google in the room, they got Facebook in the room, they got Twitter 1.0 in the room with Jack Dorsey, and they basically threatened the government's relationship, the favors for favors relationship between government and business, and said, if you don't make these changes to your terms of service, if you don't make these changes to your content moderation policy, then you're not going to get favors with us anymore. And it was a business decision. If you remember, Jack Dorsey said the reason they took Trump off Twitter was because it was a business decision. Jack Dorsey just endorsed Thomas Massey for president, Republican libertarian. He at one point called Twitter the free speech wing of the free speech party. And Mark Zuckerberg didn't want to do it either. All the emails that have come out of the Jim Jordan weaponization committee show Zuckerberg fighting with his own staff about whether they really have to go through with this. And he's told by his head of global affairs that we have bigger fish to fry with the Biden administration. And so we need to think creatively about how to be receptive to their takedown demands around COVID censorship and the like, because we are dependent on them on multiple policy fronts. And I can send you all these receipts you can put on screen.
Well, let me push back on this one a little bit, because I have a computer science degree and I was around when the first search engines were, being formed and so forth. So I know a little bit about this. My company is primarily based on YouTube, which is a Google company. And I can tell you that when it comes to the Google search algorithm, nobody knows exactly what it does. This is such a complex beast that relies on so many thousands, if not millions of different factors in order to bring someone to something they're actually searching for. I wouldn't say it's as simple as saying, well, we just switched it and suddenly it works this way or another way. Because at the end of the day, when you put out content and it really is strong content, it generally does go to the top.
No, I can play you a 10-hour supercut of Google executives talking about the authoritative news re-ranking system they implemented in 2017. It's all very public. I can literally show you conferences from May 2017 where Google is telling CIA cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy that they are doing this for this purpose, to stop populist movements who amplify their political campaigns on Google and YouTube for that purpose. And that's not to say that there isn't competition. You don't have a video necessarily super glued from one particular source, but what you have is a whitelist, blacklist, graylist type system. This is sort of like what Wikipedia does, where Wikipedia has a reliable sources threshold for being able to actually have it be entered into a Wikipedia entry. And what you'll see is that there's basically no, for example, Trump supporting right-wing sources that are allowed to be cited on Wikipedia. Breitbart is not allowed to be cited. OAN is not allowed to be cited. Gateway Pundit is not allowed to be cited. Daily Wire, Federalist. You'll never see a Wikipedia article with all these different. Even Fox News is not allowed to be cited. And it's not just a partisan political thing. You got left-wing outlets that are populist, so they're sort of NATO skeptical, blob skeptical from the left-wing perspective, like the Gray Zone, that are also banned. So they're just hard blacklisted, even if they've got the best evidence on a particular thing. But then what you have is this kind of squishy whitelist, graylist thing in the middle, where the authoritative news will say, if you are CNN, if you are the New York Times, if you are the Wall Street Journal, if you're the Washington Post, you are whitelisted. So you are going to automatically have a much better chance to appear in the algorithm, regardless of the quality of the reporting on that topic, than anything in the gray list or blacklist area. The blacklist area won't even appear. And you can even go back into the Wayback Machine and you can look at search terms for the exact same search terms. Just go to archive.org and just put in from late 2017 and late 2016 for any politically sensitive topic. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. So there is a sort of democracy within authorized sources that happens. But even then, they began to play a lot of games. They use something called the redirect method, so that when you search for certain terms, you're automatically prone to see something unrelated, tangential to what you were looking for, but not what the algorithm would have organically selected as the top 10 results.
A very interesting conversation there. Very, very interesting. Because you know what first jumped to mind for me before I introduce my esteemed panelists? I remember, I want to say it was like a meme or something back in the day on social media that was talking about how there were these meetings in Hollywood in the music industry where the different big wigs in the music industry came together and had a meeting about promoting gangster rap, or what was called reality raps back in the day, like NWA, groups like that, and kind of quieting the X Factors, those types of groups. X Clan, those types of groups. This really made me feel like it's not that I didn't believe it, but this removed any doubts that this is what's happening. This removed any doubts that this is what's happening. And so it also shows, again, before I introduce my esteemed panelists, it also shows me something too. Something that I had known, but I heard people poo-pooing it in the past, which is the internet can be used for organizing. And they knew this when all that Arab Spring stuff was going on. They realized, oh, wait a minute. these young Arabs, I forget where it was, if it was Iraq, I think it was Iraq, where they was organized on these messenger apps to vote and this, that, and the other, and rally and protest and stuff like that. They started pushing some change, or maybe it was Egypt. I can't remember now, but I knew that was a thing, and now they know. They've come to realize it for some time now, and they've put the clamps on it. So the messages about the things that we talk about, if we're not sharing this information ourselves, this is why I ask you guys to share the show. If we're not sharing it, we're not really gonna make it in those algorithms. We have to be the algorithm now. We got to share this information. So I just want to put that out there. And he has more, he says. I want to play that in the next prompt. But in the meantime, let me welcome in our brother, Black Steel. Black Steel, how art thou?
I'm doing all right, Koku. Fighting the cold, but I feel better. How about yourself?
Man, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm doing good. I can't really complain. I can't complain. I'm doing good, and I appreciate you being here. But Bakari's in the chat saying peace and Black African Pie. He says I'm late. Can you play it again? That's nearly a 10-minute clip. I can't really play that again. What I will do though, I'll play the last minute or so again. But I can't play that whole thing again. Let me go here.
Area won't even appear, and you can even go back into the way chance to appear in the algorithm. If you're the Washington Post, you are whitelisted, so you are going to automatically have a much better chance to appear in the algorithm, regardless of the quality of the reporting on that topic, than anything in the gray list or blacklist area. The blacklist area won't even appear, and you can even go back into the Wayback Machine, and you can look at search terms for the exact same search terms. Just go to archive.org and just put in from late 2017 and late 2016 for any politically sensitive topic, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. So there is a sort of democracy within authorized sources that happens. But even then, they began to play a lot of games. They use something called the redirect method, so that when you search for certain terms, you're automatically prone to see something unrelated, tangential to what you were looking for, but not what the algorithm would have organically selected as the top 10 results.
Yeah, so the conversation was along those lines. He was laying out all the different groups that played a part. He was laying out the idea. And if you pick it up, too, he's really talking about the Democrats did a lot of this stuff, too, by the way. He's laying out how some of the social media leaders, like Mark Zuckerberg and them, they didn't want to really go along with it. But the way the U.S. kind of strong arms you, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. The U.S. kind of strong arms these businesses too, where you're not going to just do what you want to do and not do what we want you to do. So very interesting conversation. But Black Seal, what were your thoughts on that video and the message in it?
I'm not surprised. Look what they did to our favorite network online. Look how they said it was in the State Department, African Stream. They said they blacklisted African Stream, took it off of social media, said they were spreading Russian propaganda. So the control of information has long been a weapon used by the colonials, neocolonialists, the racists, the Europeans. Look how when Garvey had his newspaper, The Negro World, that was banned in several African colonies. Just the spread of information has been a weapon, it's been used. So I'm not surprised that certain things get blacklisted and certain things get whitelisted, as he says. I don't know so much about the stuff about, he talks about populist movements on the right. Maybe that might have been the case back in 2016, but as of now, no. And even back then, it wasn't the case because the ideas of the Republicans is that any publicity is good publicity. They were openly platforming white supremacists, like not just Nick Fuentes, but a couple of other. They called them alt-right back then. They were given platforms. They were brought on television, and they had newspaper articles about it. So I'm not so sure, but he's talking about, they didn't want to have any populists. That's some bullshit, because we all know what we saw. But the weaponizing of information has always been a tactic. They don't want you to know certain things. They want you to hear from certain people. That's why, if you remember, around early 2000s, everybody was talking about Black Lives Matter. That was all in the news. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. But what they did is that a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement, it ended up diverting the just anger and the righteous frustration that Black people felt. And what did they get from it? They bought a mansion. They talked about making a cooking show, but there was never anything done. And eventually, they got found out it was all a fraud. But the whole Black Lives Matter slogans, and I mean, there were Black men being murdered in the street. Talking about Mike Brown, Oscar Grant. I mean, there was so many brothers being killed around that time, still are. But then when these people would come up from the Black Lives Matter, what are they talking about? Patriarchy, right? We want to see Black women in positions of leadership. What are we talking about here? But the real activists, people on the ground, we're not getting any information out. So this tactic has long been used against African people and people struggling for liberation. And it's funny now he's making this claim, this discovery of what they found out. And we've long known this has been the case, especially for Black people. So that's all I got to say about this, Matt Koku. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what's interesting too, he he kind of went out of his way not to mention Black movements, which is very interesting. Now he does get into how Black folks are kind of done wrong a little bit later in the next prompt, but in this one he kind of avoided talking about Black groups and things of that nature. The matron says they platformed Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon's one of them people he was talking about. I'm sure you were talking about the alt-right. I'm sure you were talking about Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman was one of them as well. There was a few of them who had made a name for themselves in that time. The matron says they also deplatformed many of those voices the controllers of the algorithm giveth, and it taketh away. I appreciate that too, matron. Thank you for that, for those comments, man. And thanks for being here again. So you guys know I like comic books and stuff like that. I think Black still like comic books too. And I watched some of these little YouTube programs on that stuff. And I'm beginning to notice for a little while now that some of these white boys have these channels where they're showing straight up footage of a comic book movie. And I'm like, how is that possible? Well, as we'll see a little bit later, some of these guys, all these guys are handpicked. They're handpicked and whitelisted to do what they do because it's a part of the propaganda machine. And, voices like ours once again, voices like ours won't be in the algorithm. And like Black Steel said, yeah, we knew, but did we know for sure? Well, now we know for sure. Only because this guy was inside it, not because he's white, because he was actually in the workings there, right? So I find that very interesting. So that tells us if we're sensible people, if we're KW7 said Richard Spencer. What did I say? Richard Sherman? Yeah, sorry, Richard Sherman's a football player. Richard Spencer, yeah, that guy. That's what I meant. So that should teach us that we gotta start getting a little bit more active in the real world too, but also even with our online presence. And it might not be that you'll see huge numbers as a Pan-Africanist on YouTube, but what might be more advantageous is that we email each other these shows and stuff like that. Chris, go back to the email list because I don't think they're blocking that stuff yet. And perhaps go back to that and send each other, these shows. Like, for example, KWAZ Radio, just putting the links up for the week and sending it out to you guys who tune in so that you can share the show with others who might not be aware of what we do. I think that may have to be the play because we know for sure now, because this guy worked there, the algorithm has us in the blacklist where we probably don't even come up. With that said, man, let's welcome in Brother Bakari this week. Brother Bakari, how are you?
I'm great, man. What's going on?
Good,
to
good.
the chat. Yeah, you say they got us in the blacklist. I call it the white list because the white folks making this list. But anyway, if you want to be an algorithm, just create you some channels where you are debating or crapping on black people. If you're black, look at the channels that we look at the YouTube channels that we have. That's really in algorithm, right? You will find like what has Kundis Owens actually done for anybody to know who she is? What's her job? To crap on black people. Now they have some guy named, what's his name? The Daniels guy, Antoine Daniels. That's how you can get in. You can get in like the FBA guy. We gonna work with y'all and we gonna create a hustle. Like the hidden colors thing, we'll create a hustle and that'll get them on that'll get them to follow you. Once you follow you, now all you got to do is crap on other black people everywhere. But make sure whenever you speak and you're talking about white people, you have to talk with respect. How many times have you heard him say the white supremacists are the smartest people in the world? So if you speak in a positive message about black people and you're teaching about black people standing up are things that we should do, or some great things that we have done, you won't get in the algorithm. They will block you from the algorithm. So I agree. I agree with what you said, Coco. We have to be the algorithm. We have to share the show so other people can see it. We have to put it out there, but and you have to share it on if you're on different platforms, share it on those different platforms because if you're sharing it and you're sharing it to YouTube and you've been blocked and you're not in algorithm and you've been whiteballed from and you've been whiteballed from people seeing you sharing it on YouTube, it's gonna still be the same thing. You can share it to Instagram if you can, share it to Facebook if you can. But if we want our message out through social media, we are gonna have to do it. And if the message get out on social media and you start to grow, just be prepared for a lot of their be prepared for the Coon Brigade to come after you. They will all of a sudden, if you get out there, they're going to start showing up in your chats, trying to disrupt. For example, I can't think of. I've seen a guy only on it one time when we was on here, but he got on here and he went to talking, asking did so questions that that had nothing to do with the topic. He just wanted to get on here and talk about anything. And those are the type of people that we're gonna have to start. Those are the type of people you would have to start dealing with. So if we're gonna do it, we also have to be willing to protect the channels that we put in algorithms so our people can know it. But if we're waiting on them and depending on them to put us in algorithm, it won't happen. In all honesty, if you're looking at it and you think about it like war tactics, I don't blame them for not putting it in algorithm. I don't blame them for not putting it in algorithm. If we're at war and I want to dominate and control you, I wouldn't put you in algorithm either if you're trying to pull your people away from my domination and control. So what we was talking about, Coco, we are outworked on every level. We are outworked on every level. So in order for your message to be put out, we're gonna have to work harder. We can't sit and complain and say, "Oh, they don't put us in the algorithm, or they shadow ban and they blocking whatever they're saying," But we are gonna have to do it. We're gonna have to work harder if we want our things to be. If you want your voices, you want your message to be heard. I hear the mic.
I appreciate that, Brother Bakari. I of course, I agree with everything you said. It's their duty to themselves not to put our stuff in the algorithm. But what I think this topic, if more people pay attention to it, people watch it here or on the original platform, black folks, I want black folks to recognize that you are being outworked. And the reason I bring these topics is to kind of brainstorm how do we outwork that. And the only thing two things. The one I talked about is the email list thing. And the other is I got to get that website back running again and start getting our shows on what we call it again, on the podcast apps. We got to kind of get away from this YouTube thing. It's just that YouTube makes it real simple to stream, but the message, of course, is not going to really get anywhere. So I think we have good messages. I think we should try to create like a email network and send these shows out. What do you guys in the chat think? Cheryl says his name was Pan-African Mulattoism. Yeah, that's what that guy was named, Pan-African Mulattoism. Who claimed, by the way, that he Googled or searched on YouTube for StreamYard, and this show came up. I don't believe that for a second.
Here are some of the top search results
hold on a second.
on YouTube. Start live streaming.
Hey, Coco,
yes,
put your disclaimer up because they say that Russian Jew like to strike people channel if they show the video. I don't know. I don't watch him, but I saw somebody playing it and they say they like to strike. So you have to put the disclaimer up saying it's for educational purposes only or whatever.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I used to play his videos before. I never got a strike, but maybe he does it now. But this is fair use. This is for commentary, not for profit. So, but I appreciate that, Brother Bakari. Any other last thoughts on this front? All right. Let's go to another segment of this same interview where he talks about Google being a State Department, basically a shadow State Department that takes us to Shoot the Breeze topic number 2. Shoot the Breeze topic number 2. Google is a shadow, quote unquote, shadow state department. Let's share this video instead and make sure you guys can see it. Absolutely. So we'll watch this video and then we'll comment to it.
Well, look, I can't tell you after COVID hit, I had a guest that was pushing back on the vaccine and so forth. And it wasn't that I was pushing this agenda. I was actually arguing back. And this video ended up getting hit with a community guideline strike. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm not trying to have my channel go down. So it just scared the shit out of me. So I just stopped any sort of COVID conversations on my channel after that.
Susan Wojcicki said, what was it, 100 million videos they blacklisted or algorithmically throttled that talked about COVID-19. I think it was 100 million was the number. It was a total blanket ban on anything that contradicted any element of the COVID narrative. COVID origins, COVID vaccines, COVID mask efficacy, COVID lockdowns, COVID mandates, the whole thing. And Google, by the way, these YouTube services are a funnel for a lot of other Google investments. Google is very deeply co-invested in the vaccine space. Google is an addendum in many respects of the U.S. government. I mean, it's useful in this context to understand where Google came from. Google was started at Stanford by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who were getting their Stanford PhD on a DARPA grant for a joint CIA-NSA project called the Massive Digital Data System Program, which was a CIA-NSA program to track how birds of a feather flock together in Web 1.0 static web page search. This is as the internet started as a military project. ARPA, DARPA, made civilian use by the National Science Foundation, and then rolled out to the World Wide Web in 1990. And in that period, you had all these different foreign countries who were searching the internet for things. And the CIA and NSA believed that search results could be useful to, if they could have a systematic way of understanding search queries in foreign countries, that it could serve as a early warning political radar system in order to track the rise and fall of popularity of various political movements. And that would allow intelligence and statecraft to interface and potentially amplify or subvert those movements. And that's how Google started. Google became a military contractor. The first year it went public in the early 2000s. Google only has Google Maps because they bought Keyhole from the Central Intelligence Agency. Google has been this way from cradle to grave. Google will always be what Julian Assange called a shadow State Department. And you can read Julian Assange's article called "Google is Not What It Seems." And this gets to how we even got, how did these content moderation policies start changing at Google in 2016? A lot of this came from this Jared Cohen nexus, who was a State Department policy planning staff guy who was instrumental in the Arab Spring and taught the State Department how to use social media for regime change operations to cultivate mass movement destabilization campaigns, because social media could galvanize crowds way faster than and way more cheaply and at scale than running these CIA operations out of U.S. embassies or consulates or CIA station houses. And where did Jared Cohen go after being the State Department and CIA's whiz kid for starting color revolutions? He went straight to Google. And when Google wasn't even in the top 100 companies, right on the eve of the Arab Spring, which he's credited for in many ways because these were social media revolutions that followed his blueprint, and he worked intimately with the groups on the ground. And then he goes straight to Google. He becomes Eric Schmidt, the CEO's right-hand man. And I've seen Google company emails from my sources with Jared Cohen very diligently tracking the 2016 election as Trump was gaining in the polls and talking with Eric Schmidt about it. And then what happens there? Then they rebrand his one-person think tank at Google, which was called Google Ideas. It changes its name to Jigsaw, and then they train what was essentially the world's first retail artificial intelligence-based censorship application. It was called Perspective. Anyone can go to Google right now and look up Perspective API from Google Jigsaw. The first three things it was trained on were the 2016 presidential election, the Brexit vote, and then climate change was the third one. But it was intensely focused on content moderation, censorship of political populist movements in the US and UK at the time, and now it's all over the world, and nuking hundreds of millions of posts, comments. This thing was licensed to comment sections so that you could, just turn down the volume on any keyword or phrase associated with a dissident thought. And this was an addendum of Google.
Well, there has to be a balancing point. So, for example, when COVID first hit, you had celebrities who had big online followings like Carrie Hilson that was saying that 5G causes COVID, right? And people were actually running with that and really believing it. Like, if you let these things run rampant, people are going to start tearing down cell phone towers and all types of other crazy stuff because this is becoming amplified to the top. And as you know, conspiracy theory is always a lot more popular than something that might be kind of boring in the news. So how do you really balance these things?
Well, that's why God invented the criminal justice system. You tear down a 5G tower and you go to prison, federal prison for 30 years. That sets a pretty strong example. We didn't have an epidemic of people tearing down 5G towers, even though that talk was out there. Even if it was censored on YouTube, you could still see that on static blogs and independent web pages and word of mouth. And even then, what you get is even more fringe characters who believe they're onto some secret knowledge because it must be true because the government is banning you from saying it.
Right.
And that almost makes it seem more true. I actually think that when you allow conspiracy theories to play out in the marketplace of ideas, although it may be a little bit terrifying to the powers that be that they can gain some initial traction, what you find is that people's reputations really get crushed when they go out on a limb on something that's wrong and it's borne out over time. They lose trust, they lose followership. If they're entertaining, they may have some, residual base or keep a certain amount. But generally speaking, people, if you're really wrong on something, you pay for that as a content creator down the line. But the fact is when this is kind of one of the things that backfires about censorship. There's what's the quote? Never believe anything until it's officially denied. And there is an element of that, which is that if something is considered such a danger to the U.S. State Department, to the U.S. military, to these multinational corporations, that your belief in it and sharing it with a friend is you align enough powerful forces next to each other against some simple sentence I want to say to a buddy. And I go, well, wait, why don't you want me to say that? What's really going on here? And I think that when you get in the business of the government putting its boot down on the throat of a private company to throttle billions of people around the world with what they can and can't say, that becomes very quickly abused. And it was. And now basically every sensitive topic has I could talk about the JFK assassination, climate change, the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. And you will see on YouTube an interstitial that will link you straight to the Wikipedia, and which is another rabbit hole of the forces around Wikipedia. But the fact is it's a dangerous game, and it sort of subverts what we consider to be the legitimacy of democracy, which is that we get to vote on politicians based on what we know or what we can look up or do our own research about those politicians. If an entrenched class of politicians and their surrounding corporate and stakeholder interests can stop us from learning information, then we don't even know what we're voting on. We get back to this Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah. So let me just say, I messed up. That was the wrong That was the wrong video. The video I had in mind, if you've seen this interview, it's where he's talking about how America actually has rappers coming in. I'll bring it back next week probably. As rappers coming in, they bring them in and train them and things of that nature. They go to Nigeria and they build up a star and they train them. I thought that would have been a good conversation, but let's do what we have. So again, Google is a shadow state department. Now we talked about it in the last prompt. We talked about how if we were them, we should be doing the same thing, right? We should be diverting any conversations that goes against empire, and we should be promoting either some propaganda that promotes empire, or we should be distracting with nonsense. So I feel them on that. Okay, kudos to y'all. But again, how many of us use Google? And how much of this is really being used to undermine our people globally? That's a question. And my thing is this: since we've always have had these suspicions, and now we could have some more confirmation. Why is it? And this is going to lead into the next topic. But why is it that people, no matter what race, but people, us especially, why do we go along with it? Let me throw it to Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari, what's it?
Skip me, man. I had a phone call. I ain't listened too much. Skip me. I'm sorry. I apologize, but I had a phone call on my other phone.
All right. Black Steel, what say you?
I mean, the reason why, these multimedia corporations, they work for the State Department because they want to control what people see and what people don't see, right? Why do you think they were so insistent on buying TikTok? TikTok was not controlled by the State Department, and that was one of the reasons why they wanted to get TikTok under their control. Because the whole thing about it's spreading Chinese propaganda, no, it wasn't. They really were concerned about what information the American public sees, right? And this is something that has always been the case, right? They want to control the algorithm. It's really, if you look at it from my perspective, I think it's barbarism on a high-tech level, right? You're talking about looking at things from a technological standpoint. You can see that, hey, these platforms, be it Google, be it Microsoft, X, Instagram, they all focus on spreading and disseminating propaganda. All right, and that's why I always say that Americans are probably the most heavily propagandized population in the world, because from the time we open our eyes to the time we go to sleep, it's a nonstop, steady stream of it. And because they control the algorithm, much of it is able to get through. That's what made TikTok so dangerous. When you could go online and you could see, Palestinian children getting blown to pieces, that's not being shown on the news. That's not being shown on, Fox. So you had not just that, but you could see directly from individuals. This was something they had to get under control. So Google functions that way. Look at the movies that come out, right? You mentioned the comic book movies. Every movie that uses the military has to have submitted script to the State Department for approval because they don't want any. They want to be able to control the messages. So it's okay to look at these movies, but you never. But you always see these movies show the American military in a positive light. You know, anything from Captain America to Independence Day to, the list can go on and on. It's always good. War of the Worlds was a good one. They have a military advisor on the film. So all these things work to help disseminate the propaganda that America is great or that the West is great. This is the only way to live. But I think what's happening is that as the material conditions start to get worse, right, the propaganda is starting to lose its effectiveness. So a lot of the things that's going on in our world that's impacting people on a day-to-day basis, people don't want to hear about how great the country is when they don't have enough food, to feed their kids. They don't want to hear that when they don't have enough money to make their rent or they don't have health insurance. And I think that the propaganda can only go so far until the real life conditions start to really impact people. All right. Those are my thoughts. Well, thank you.
That's interesting, Blackster. I appreciate that. You think that there's some erosion as far as propaganda because more people are struggling, I guess.
Absolutely. Just take for right now, this whole thing with the SNAP benefits and whatnot. It's hard when you see that that your government is not only not paying you, but they're actually going to court to prevent from paying you, right? Then the recent elections that we had, the ones in New York and New Jersey, it came out people are overwhelmingly sick of it, right? I don't think they're sick enough to break free from the two-party duopoly but I think they are speaking with one voice. We are tired of the way we are being treated. I think that the propaganda is really starting to peak. Now, you're always going to have some dumbasses who can't see past their nose. But, I think for a lot of people that they're waking up, at the very least, they realize they're being lied to.
Appreciate that. So that's interesting because this is why I like to have these conversations and see and hear other people's observation of the world. Because, we all live in it, but we might not all see it the same way. And I really appreciate what Black Steel said. So, Black Steel, if you don't mind me asking another question about it, how do we use that phenomenon, that this idea that with so much more struggle and people looking at who's causing the struggle, who's actively causing the struggle in front of them, can we use that, or are people just set on this cognitive dissonance, I guess, where they'll still support even though they're being crushed by the system? How can we use it, and if so, how?
I think we can use it. I think there's an opportunity for a well-organized political movement to do something about that. And we have to have our own propaganda. Propaganda isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? It can be used it's like a hammer. It can be used to build, it can be used to destroy, So I think that there is a method for that. And I think especially within the Pan-African movement, Black African people have always, we're probably, especially in the West, we're heavily propagandized. But at the same time, I think that that's where the whole term woke came from, right? To be aware of what's going on. And I think that to a certain extent, because we bear the brunt of the psychopath's aggression towards us, outside of the coons or whatnot, we're very aware. We're very well aware of what's going on. I think that there is a space for that, but it has to be done in an organized way. And also, too, we got to be there for people in their hours of need. Or people shouldn't have to be going to Catholic missions for food. There should be some grassroots things going on the ground, African with Black people, to look out for our own community. Not nothing against those groups that they want to help out, but I think that we have to start getting to a point where we can look after our own people and supply their needs. Because once you see that, you can see the lies for what they really are.
Well said there, but I appreciate your outlook on that. I will ask Brother Ricard if he got any last thoughts, because I know he's there, but I don't think he really saw the video. But yeah, that was a good analysis, man. I was hoping to hear a little bit more from the chat, but Trigger Happy, speaking on this prompt, he says the recent propaganda war in Nigeria has a lot to do with it. Has a lot to do with Israel wanting to change what is the central conflict of the world, aligned with aligning interests. Let me try to read this again. The recent propaganda war in Nigeria has a lot to do with Israel wanting to change what is the central conflict of the world, aligned with aligning interests, I guess, from France and U.S. Yes, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the propaganda machine. How do we outwork it, man? I hope people have some comments later on in the playback for what Black Steel would have said about that topic. In the meantime, though, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 3. We're making really good time tonight. We may even finish early tonight, since we're short-handed. Once again, shout out to Buana. I know it's his birthday, so shout out to him. Hope you're enjoying it. I'm sure everyone else wishes you the same. Shoot the Breeze topic number 3 says, why crowds choose lies over truth, according to Plato. It takes us to YouTube. Make sure you can see my screen. Yep. We're going to watch and then we'll discuss. Sorry, Streamlabs does this thing where the audio will just knock out and I have to reconnect. So let's do this again. Share my screen. Okay, you guys should be able to see this.
Why do millions of people simultaneously believe the same obvious lies? Why do intelligent individuals, when gathered in groups, consistently make decisions that seem utterly irrational? And why does this pattern repeat throughout history with such devastating precision that you can predict exactly when societies will choose comfortable deception over uncomfortable reality? Right now, as you're watching this, billions of people across the globe are actively choosing deception over truth. They're not stupid. They're not ignorant. They're not victims of manipulation. They're making calculated psychological decisions to embrace lies because truth threatens something more precious to them than reality itself. Their sense of belonging, their identity, their entire understanding of who they are. This isn't a modern phenomenon born of social media echo chambers or political polarization. This isn't about fake news or conspiracy theories or partisan propaganda. This is the fundamental architecture of human psychology, identified over 2,000 years ago by a philosopher who watched his entire civilization commit intellectual suicide in real time. Plato witnessed something that should terrify anyone who understands its implications. He watched the execution of Socrates, the wisest man in Athens, voted to death by a democratic mob who preferred their comfortable illusions to his uncomfortable questions. That moment revealed a truth about human nature so disturbing that most people still refuse to accept it today. If you want to understand why societies collapse, why democracies fail, why intelligent people believe absurd things, why rational civilizations make irrational choices, you need to understand what Plato discovered about crowds, truth, and the psychology of collective self-deception. Subscribe now because what you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you see human behavior, social movements, political systems, and the hidden forces that determine whether civilizations survive or destroy themselves. The year was 399 BCE. Athens, the birthplace of democracy, the crown jewel of ancient civilization, the most intellectually advanced society in human history, had just committed an act of collective insanity. They had sentenced Socrates to death. Not for murder, not for treason, not for corruption, for asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Think about this for a moment. The most advanced civilization of its time chose to execute its wisest citizen because he insisted on examining their beliefs, challenging their assumptions, forcing them to think clearly about their most cherished convictions. The crowd that condemned him wasn't composed of ignorant peasants or bloodthirsty barbarians. These were educated citizens, accomplished philosophers, successful politicians, respected intellectuals, the cultural elite of their era. Yet when forced to choose between wisdom and comfort, between truth and belonging, between reality and their collective illusions, they chose to kill the truth-teller. Plato watched this happen. He saw his teacher, the most rational person he knew, destroyed by a supposedly rational society that couldn't tolerate rational inquiry. And in that moment, Plato understood something profound about crowds that we're only beginning to appreciate in our interconnected age. Crowds don't seek truth. They seek validation. They don't want reality. They want confirmation of what they already believe. They don't value wisdom. They value consensus. And they will systematically destroy anyone who threatens their collective delusions, no matter how intelligent, how moral, or how beneficial those challenges might be. This insight became the foundation of everything Plato wrote about politics, education, human nature, and the conditions necessary for a just society. He realized that democracy, as Athens practiced it, contained a fatal flaw. It assumed that truth could be determined by majority opinion, that wisdom was somehow democratically distributed, that crowds were capable of making rational decisions about complex realities. But here's what makes Plato's analysis even more devastating. He discovered that crowds don't just accidentally prefer lies to truth. They systematically, predictably, inevitably choose lies because lies serve psychological functions that truth cannot provide. Truth is isolating. It separates you from the group. It makes you individually responsible for your beliefs and actions. It forces you to confront uncomfortable realities about yourself, your society, your limitations, your mortality. Truth demands intellectual courage, emotional maturity, and moral independence that most people haven't developed and don't want to develop. Lies are communal. They bind groups together through shared belief. They provide instant identity, immediate purpose, automatic belonging. They protect people from having to face difficult questions about their lives, their choices, their failures, their fears. Lies offer the illusion of certainty in an uncertain world, the comfort of simple answers to complex problems. When a crowd is forced to choose between truth and belonging, between reality and identity, between facts and community, between wisdom and validation, they choose belonging every single time. Not because they can't recognize truth, but because they value other things more than truth. This is why conspiracy theories spread faster than scientific facts. This is why political movements succeed through emotional manipulation rather than rational argument. This is why social media algorithms amplify outrage and confirmation bias rather than nuanced thinking. This is why even highly educated people believe obviously false things when those beliefs serve their tribal identity. Plato saw this pattern playing out in ancient Athens, and he understood that it would continue playing out throughout history wherever crowds were given power to determine truth, wherever popularity was confused with validity, wherever consensus was mistaken for wisdom. Consider how this dynamic manifests in contemporary society. Look at how information spreads through social networks. People don't share content because it's accurate, well-researched, or intellectually rigorous. They share content because it confirms their existing beliefs, strengthens their tribal identity, makes them feel righteous, superior, validated in their worldview. The most viral content isn't the most truthful. It's the most emotionally satisfying. It's the content that provides simple explanations for complex problems, that blames convenient scapegoats for systemic issues, that promises easy solutions to difficult challenges, that tells people exactly what they want to hear about themselves and their enemies. This creates what Plato would recognize as a fundamental systemic problem. In any society where truth is determined by popularity, lies will always win because lies are inherently more popular than truth. Truth is often inconvenient, complex, nuanced, ambiguous, uncomfortable. It requires intellectual effort to understand, emotional courage to accept, and moral strength to act upon. Truth forces people to question their assumptions, revise their beliefs, admit their mistakes, confront their limitations. Lies can be simple, emotionally satisfying, perfectly tailored to existing prejudices and fears. They require no intellectual effort, demand no moral courage, threaten no existing beliefs. They offer instant gratification, immediate certainty, effortless superiority over those who disagree. When Plato developed his famous allegory of the cave, he was describing exactly this psychological phenomenon. The prisoners chained in the cave prefer the familiar shadows on the wall to the harsh reality of sunlight. The shadows are comfortable, predictable, non-threatening. They don't challenge the prisoner's understanding of reality or demand any difficult adjustments in thinking or behavior. But here's the crucial insight that most people miss about Plato's allegory. The prisoners don't just passively reject the truth when it's offered to them. They actively attack anyone who tries to enlighten them. They become violent in defense of their illusions. They treat truth-telling as an act of aggression against their community. This is exactly what happened to Socrates. This is what happens to whistleblowers who expose institutional corruption. This is what happens to investigative journalists who challenge popular narratives. This is what happens to scientists who present evidence that contradicts widely held beliefs. This is what happens to anyone who threatens the collective delusions that hold social groups together. Crowds don't just choose lies over truth. They punish truth-tellers and reward skilled liars. They create social systems that systematically incentivize deception and penalize honesty. They develop elaborate mechanisms for silencing dissent and enforcing conformity to group beliefs. Understanding this dynamic explains so much about human history that seems otherwise inexplicable. It explains why rational societies make consistently irrational decisions. It explains why intelligent people believe absurd things when they're part of groups. It explains why civilizations collapse even when their problems are obvious and their solutions are readily available. It explains why scientific progress encounters such fierce resistance. Why social reforms face violent opposition. Why moral advances meet organized backlash. Why every attempt to expand human understanding or improve social conditions must overcome the determined resistance of crowds defending their familiar lies against uncomfortable truths. The crowd psychology that Plato identified operates at every level of social organization. In families, where uncomfortable truths about dysfunction, addiction, or abuse are systematically avoided in favor of maintaining artificial harmony. In organizations, where honest feedback about performance or problems is discouraged in favor of positive thinking and team cohesion. In communities, where acknowledging difficult realities about inequality, injustice, or institutional failure threatens group solidarity. In nations, where complex problems are reduced to simple narratives that blame convenient outsiders and promise magical solutions. Where historical crimes are denied or justified rather than honestly confronted. Where present failures are attributed to external enemies rather than internal contradictions. At every level, the pattern is the same. Groups prefer comforting lies to uncomfortable truths, and they will punish anyone who insists on replacing those lies with reality. But Plato didn't just diagnose this problem. He proposed a solution, though it's a solution that most people find even more uncomfortable than the problem itself. Plato argued that societies should be governed not by crowds, not by popular opinion, not by democratic consensus, but by philosopher kings. Individuals who have undergone rigorous intellectual and moral training, who have learned to prefer truth over popularity, reality over comfort, wisdom over validation. This sounds profoundly elitist to modern ears, and in many ways it is. But Plato's point wasn't that some people are inherently superior to others. His point was that seeking truth, thinking clearly, and making wise decisions require specific skills, disciplines, and character traits that most people haven't developed because they haven't been properly educated and because they lack sufficient motivation. Just as we don't allow untrained people to perform surgery or design bridges or pilot aircraft, Plato argued, we shouldn't allow intellectually and morally untrained people to make decisions about truth, justice, and the organization of society. This idea horrifies contemporary sensibilities because we've been taught that everyone's opinion is equally valid, that democracy means giving everyone an equal voice regardless of their knowledge or wisdom, that expertise is a form of oppression rather than a necessary qualification for complex decisions. But Plato would argue that these beliefs themselves demonstrate exactly the kind of crowd thinking that leads societies to systematically choose lies over truth. We prefer the comforting democratic lie that all opinions are equal to the uncomfortable aristocratic truth that some people know more than others, that some ideas are better than others, that wisdom is rare and difficult to achieve. The consequences of this crowd-driven approach to truth are visible everywhere in contemporary society. We see them in the systematic rejection of scientific consensus on climate change, vaccine safety, and evolutionary biology. We see them in political movements that promise simple solutions to complex problems while demonizing experts who point out the complexity. We see them in social media platforms that amplify popular misinformation while suppressing accurate but unpopular information. We see them in educational systems that prioritize self-esteem over intellectual rigor, that avoid challenging students' existing beliefs, that treat all perspectives as equally valid regardless of evidence. We see them in news media that tailors coverage to audience preferences rather than factual accuracy, that sensationalizes trivial controversies while ignoring important but complex issues, that treats politics as entertainment rather than serious governance. Most troubling, we see them in the emergence of what philosophers call post-truth culture. A society where the very concept of objective truth is rejected in favor of subjective experience and tribal loyalty, where facts become matters of political opinion, where reality itself becomes optional. This represents the complete triumph of crowd psychology over rational thinking. When truth itself becomes a matter of democratic consensus, when facts become partisan talking points, when reality becomes a social construction, we've reached the logical endpoint of the dynamic that Plato identified 24 centuries ago. Yet Plato also understood that this dynamic isn't inevitable or insurmountable. Individuals can escape the cave. They can learn to prefer truth over comfort, reality over illusion, wisdom over validation. But it requires enormous effort, sustained discipline, considerable courage, and often painful sacrifice of social belonging and popular approval. The process Plato described as philosophical education involves systematically questioning everything you believe, examining the logical foundations of your assumptions, developing the intellectual tools necessary for clear thinking, and cultivating the moral courage to accept uncomfortable truths about yourself and your society. This isn't just an academic exercise or intellectual hobby. It's a profound transformation of character that enables individuals to resist crowd psychology and make decisions based on reality rather than social pressure, on evidence rather than emotion, on reason rather than tribal loyalty. But here's the tragic paradox that Plato identified. The people most capable of this philosophical transformation are often the least motivated to pursue it, because they benefit from existing systems and have little incentive to challenge prevailing orthodoxies. And the people most motivated to seek truth are often the least equipped to handle the psychological demands of genuine philosophical inquiry. This creates what Plato saw as a nearly impossible situation. Societies desperately need philosopher kings to survive and flourish, but they systematically prevent the development of philosopher kings and punish anyone who attempts to become one. The solution, according to Plato, requires a complete restructuring of education and social organization. Instead of teaching people what to think, we need to teach them how to think. Instead of rewarding conformity and popularity, we need to reward curiosity and intellectual courage. Instead of making truth subordinate to consensus, we need to make consensus subordinate to truth. But implementing such radical changes requires exactly the kind of philosophical leadership that crowds consistently reject. It's a bootstrap problem. We need wise leaders to create a society that systematically produces wise leaders. But we can't get wise leaders without a society that values wisdom over popularity. This doesn't mean the situation is entirely hopeless. Throughout history, exceptional individuals have successfully resisted crowd psychology and maintained their commitment to truth, even when it required enormous personal sacrifice. Scientists have maintained intellectual integrity despite social pressure and professional consequences. Artists have continued creating authentic work despite market demands and critical opposition. Moral leaders have stood for justice despite popular hostility and violent persecution. These individuals demonstrate that it's possible to escape Plato's cave, to choose truth over lies, reality over illusion, wisdom over validation. But they also demonstrate how rare and difficult such choices are, how much courage and discipline they require, and how much most people are willing to sacrifice to avoid making them. The question each of us faces is whether we're willing to pay the price of philosophical truth, the loss of comfortable illusions, the sacrifice of easy social belonging, the burden of thinking for ourselves rather than letting crowds think popular, security of shared delusions to the uncertainty of independent thought. They choose tribal identity over individual integrity, social validation over personal truth, the comfort of belonging to the difficulty of thinking. And this, ultimately, is why crowds always choose lies over truth. Not because they lack the intellectual capacity to recognize truth, but because truth threatens everything they value more than truth itself. Belonging, identity, security, comfort, the illusion of certainty in an uncertain world. Plato's brutal warning wasn't just about ancient Athens or historical democracies. It was about human nature itself, about the eternal tension between our capacity for wisdom and our need for belonging, between our ability to think clearly and our desire for social validation, between our potential for truth and our preference for comfortable illusion. Understanding this dynamic doesn't make it easier to resist. If anything, it makes resistance more difficult because it deep the problem goes, how psychology, edited structure of social organization. But understanding also creates genuine possibility. When you recognize crowd psychology operating in yourself and others, you can begin to make conscious choices about when to conform and when to resist, when to seek validation and when to seek truth, when to prioritize belonging and when to prioritize integrity. You can develop what Plato would call philosophical immunity, the intellectual and moral capacity to maintain independent judgment even when surrounded by people who have surrendered their ability to think for themselves. This immunity doesn't make you superior to others or exempt from human limitations. It makes you responsible to others, obligated to use your capacity for clear thinking in service of truth rather than personal advantage, committed to helping others develop their own philosophical capabilities rather than exploiting their intellectual dependence. It means becoming the kind of person who asks uncomfortable questions even when comfortable answers are available, who challenges popular assumptions even when those challenges are unwelcome, who refuses to participate in collective self-deception even when participation would be easier, safer, and more profitable. That's Plato's enduring challenge to anyone willing to take truth seriously. Will you choose the comfort of the cave or the responsibility of philosophical sight? Will you follow crowds into collective delusion or maintain your individual commitment to reality? Will you prioritize belonging over integrity, validation over wisdom, comfort over truth? The answer to these questions determines not just your personal authenticity and intellectual development, but the fate of the societies you help create and the world you leave behind. Because in the end, societies that systematically choose lies over truth don't just fail to flourish, they fail to survive. And that's a truth that no amount of crowd psychology can change. If this philosophical analysis challenged your assumptions about truth, democracy, and human nature, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What's
All right. Quite a lot discussed there, but I think you could see the through line that a lot of this stuff has to do with belonging. But I have while I was watching, I developed a follow-up question. I think that Trigger Happy hit on it as well. But I'll bring up the follow-up after we get through the main conversation. In the chat, Jose says, hi, folks. Then he says, Plato? Yes, sir. We're talking Plato tonight. He also says, who's being lectured here? That was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Who are these uneducated people? Shout out to Joe, by the way. It says, good evening, Bitter Meds fam. Shout out to Afro Native World. He was here earlier. I saw him in the chat. So shout out to him as well. But Shoot the Breeze topic number 3, why crowds choose lies over truth. Let's talk about what we heard first, and then I'll add all the follow-up questions after. Let me start with Black Steel on this one. Black Steel, what are your thoughts?
It's easier to fool people than it is to convince people they've been fooled, right? So most people would rather believe a comfortable lie than a hard truth. I mean, here we are talking about the bitter medicine podcast because the medicine is bitter. But I think part of it is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? What that is like a cognitive bias that people who have a low ability in a specific area to give overly positive assessments of themselves. So people are dumb. They don't realize they're dumb. People who know the least about a topic are usually the loudest voices on a subject. This is something that you see in large groups of people. And also combining it with the propaganda that we see on a regular basis, you know, this is what you expect to see from people, from a society in mass. And let me just say, you're going to see it more with white people. Okay, the European mind, right? They need to believe, they need to be above somebody, right? So anything that reinforces their psychological need to be superior to others, they're going to believe it, regardless of what you tell them. That's why we have so many problems in the world now, because they would rather reinforce their own beliefs than do the right thing. And I mean, I think that the United States could look like China. I mean, as far as with the rails and the low cost of living and the universal health care, if it was just white people in America, if it was just them, because then they wouldn't have anybody else to blame their problems on. But now they can blame them on the immigrants, the Mexicans, the blacks, the faggots, you know what I'm saying, the transgenders, anybody else they can blame the problems on. And they're gonna believe it. They're gonna believe it because again, it's easier to fool people than convince them they've been fooled. Around the Great Depression era, there was a radio broadcast of the famous novel by H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, talking about an invasion from Mars, and they played it on the radio as if it was like a real um, invasion from space, and people were literally out here grabbing their shotguns, driving around looking for aliens because they were afraid they were under attack. Now, and to the point where the radio station was calling people, "Hey, this is not real. This is just a TV show." But because the mass psychosis had grabbed the whole of people's minds, right? It was hard to convince them that they had been fooled. And that's really what I guess that's what Plato is saying. His whole thing about philosopher kings. That's a European. And I would say this, you do want to have the people who are in charge, you want them to have some level of education, right? You want them to be able to have some intellect. But unfortunately, they don't want to go through who's the right person for the job. They want to go for what's popular. You know, can I have a beer with this guy? Right? Who gives a fuck if you have a beer with somebody? Can you run the government? Can you keep the traffic lights turning on time? But unfortunately, because of the people who feel like they know more than everyone else, we're in the situation we're in now. So those are just my thoughts, Koku. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, appreciate that, Black C. You sounding better now too, man. Like you're feeling better. That sounds good. Let's welcome in Sister Cheryl this week. Sister Cheryl, how are you? Okay, I guess Sister Cheryl is not there, unless she's on mute. But looks
Sorry,
like she's.
can I be heard?
Yes, you can be heard now. How are you this week?
I'm fine. How's everyone?
Good. Can't complain. You sound a little bit low though, but
Oh, hold on. Phone. Hello?
yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so
You had some things in the chat, so go ahead and go ahead and tell us your thoughts on this front.
So I think when it comes to like people who are in power, like I was just talking to just now, I was just now talking to my husband about this. Like when white people are in power, a lot of the times they know when a lie is a lie. And when they're trying to push a lie on another group of people, 9 times out of 10, they know it's a lie. But might is right. And so if they say that, it's day, but it's really night, it's day. You know what I mean? So it's more about power. Like I understand what Plato was saying about the confirmation bias, and I totally see that that can be true as well. But when it comes to having power and everything, if I tell this lie, I can know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. You guys, it's like for white people, it's like you guys don't know it's a lie. We know it's a lie, but because we have power, it's what we say it is. Doesn't matter if it's a lie or not. But I feel like for people who don't have power, it's more that's when you get more into the and for groups that don't have as much power. So there it's easier to come to it's easier to fall under like confirmation bias. So like I'm trying to figure out a better way to explain this. Um it's kind of hard because there's so many examples because like I guess like when like I was saying in the chat then so the truth is boring. And if you don't have power and if there's something I guess it's easier for your mind to be manipulated when you don't have power or when you don't have no semblance of anything resembling power. You're more easier to fall victim to confirmation bias. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, we got you, Sister Cheryl. It's interesting here because the follow-up question I'm going to ask is, I think, going to be very interesting as well. Afro-Native World says Mama Marimba Ani has a good critique in her book, Yuru. Can you tell us a little bit of that critique in the chat? I'll read it on the screen. Shout out to Daily Affirmations by Pauline saying good evening. Shout out Jose earlier. Jose, where are you at? You seem to be in a noisy place listening to the show, but thanks for tuning in all the same. With all of that said, let's hear from Brother Bakari on this. Brother Bakari, what say you to all of it?
What's going on again? Look, what's up, Cheryl? You weren't up here before. I'm gonna go a little different take than Cheryl and Black Steel, even though I agree. But I ain't focused on white folks. I'm focused on how all them lies affected black folks and still affect black folks. All the conspiracy lies that we are willing to that can gain. I know we spoke on it earlier, how they put things in algorithm, and then our people began to follow them. I'm the guy sitting on YouTube with a baseball cap with some chicken feathers in it, saying he's the indigenous man to America. So, and you can find black people, and you can find us following that. We follow the white people tell the lies, but a lot of black people follow those lies. Like uh during the COVID, it was some guy, y'all probably know who he is. I just laughed, but people repeated it. Phil Valentine, right? If you want to kill the COVID, paint one room in your house with lead paint, and it'll automatically kill COVID. Like, where you gonna get lead paint from? But we allow
Really? He
people
said
like,
that?
yes, he said that. And then I had people
Hold on, what?
You
paint
sure that
one
wasn't
room in your.
AI?
No, that was Phil Valentine, and he was doing an interview on Sarnetta. It wasn't AI. You had paint one room of your house with lead paint, and it killed the COVID. Uh,
Oh my God.
I'm not here to tell anyone whether they should take a vaccine or not, but people like what's his name, the Muslim guy, Rizza Islam. Yeah, COVID means that not just COVID, the vaccines are made with rat lungs and stuff. And you find people that would go around and just repeat this guy who has clearly scammed the black community, who has clearly scammed, and him and his family was going to court because some parents complained, somebody in his family, his mama, somebody worked in the school system, or he did, and one of them was a therapist, and they were sending them there, and they was teaching, not really helping the black kids, teaching them to be Scientologists. But these people can get a mouthpiece, and they are out there, and people repeat it. Now I'm the person who gonna be against all of that. Because one thing, I don't just do conspiracies because I don't think everything is a conspiracy. That's why they wrote a book a long time ago. I heard Dr. Amos Wilson talk about it. Uh, the name of the book was Black People Are Easily Attracted to Conspiracies. And we have made everything a conspiracy because we follow, she'll say white people know they telling a lie. Let white people follow them. We won't listen to a black person when a black person saying, don't follow that. I can go back to the vaccine. Now, the same person they was following, RFK, then Alex Jones saying the exact same thing they're saying. Now, this person have come out and said, oh, I made a mistake. It wasn't the vaccine that caused autism. It was Tylenol that caused, taking Tylenol caused autism. So I haven't heard
That's not what he
anyone.
said, but I get your point.
No, that's what he said. He said he said Tylenol causes autism. That's
No,
that's
no. He didn't say Tylenol caused autism. He said that you should consult with your doctor and that it could be linked to cause to autism. But
to
it
causing
says you can.
autism.
But it said it can be linked to autism. I think we gotta pay attention to our words because and he also emphasized that you should consult with your doctor, which it does say that on the bottle of the Tylenol and
But they
and
say that okay, now watch
Tylenol
this.
went
They say that
live.
about
Okay,
every medication. Every
Tylenol went
medic
live.
any
Ty-
medication is gonna say you
But
can
he,
consult
but he, but
you
that's
can
what he said.
consult a doctor. And now we have someone who's protecting one of the ultimate conspirators. And that's what I mean. And about
I'm not protecting anyone.
we follow the white lies and the whites conspiracy, and it hurt black
Okay,
people.
but we
Dr.
were
Amos
also
Wilson,
getting we were
can I
also getting people
share? Let me
that
share.
were
Okay, I
taking
got you. I
Tylenol
got you, but
to
let me
prove
finish,
him
baby.
wrong that were
I got
pregnant.
you.
That's very unsafe. And you take
Okay,
too many Tylenols,
okay.
and it will be your last headache. It will be your last pregnancy.
I got you. I got you. I got you. I got you. I don't know nobody die from Tylenol. That's me personally.
Of course,
Maybe you
because
do.
people,
I don't.
yeah, but
Oh my
people
God! Can I
people
please finish? Come on. Let me finish. I ain't cut you. I let y'all say what y'all wanted to say. I let y'all say what y'all wanted to say. That's all I'm saying. But my point is, once again, and these things will hurt black people more than anything. And then we won't listen when somebody show you something different. All we had to do is look and see with the lunatic in office and everything that was said during the campaign. And when you look up some of these things, you could just see that it's just a lie. But because it's been said and a lot of people have repeated them, people just roll with it. So then we become okay. I even had someone tell me, oh, he wasn't talking about Haitians when he said they're eating the dogs and cats. They're eating the pets. I'm like, dude, they done posted it all over social media before you. Well, he wouldn't say nothing. He wouldn't do nothing like that. And that's what I mean about how it hurt black people. When I understand black people want to be, I understand why black people is against the government. I literally understand that. But for me, I'm not gonna sit and listen to nobody where he's a worm a worm got in his head and ate piece of his brain and died in his head. Like, there's no need for that person to talk to me. That person can talk to someone else. But for me, and it's some stuff we just don't challenge. They said it, a lot of people said it, so now it automatically makes sense. But no, it doesn't. And when how they can put a voice out there for us to follow. And it's part of the reason. It's part of the reason. When we talk about unity or coming together, which is almost shot now, but Pan-Africanism, let's just put a voice in algorithm who can tell you Harriet Tubman never existed. And you find people that will constantly repeat Harriet Tubman never existed. Nat Turner never existed. All these are just people that just white people just made up. Don't have to show any proof, don't ever have to do anything, but there's enough black people that will listen to it and follow it. Like I said about how the friend, if she was listening, it'd be bad, but it is what it is. Aboriginal too. I said, well, so name me some. She's indigenous to this land. So name me the indigenous food y'all ate. Tell me your indigenous language. Tell me anything indigenous. But those are the type of things that I'm talking about. How some people can get on here and say anything, and we will just a lot of us. When I'm saying we, I'm not separating black people. I'm just saying we, not saying all of us just follow anything that's said. No one is on here is following an indigenous. So I don't think nobody on here following saying, oh, we're indigenous. Stuff that I'm using is examples, right? And that's what I mean. So then it started to hurt us. We ain't the same. So now we don't see ourselves. A lot of us, we don't see ourselves the same. And for me, the video wouldn't speak. Yeah, white people lied. That's what they have always done. Lied, robbed, raped, and steal. But for me, when I heard the video, I'm the one who sent it to Koku. I sent him a couple more because it's a whole, he got a few videos on that type of topic. But for me, when I listen to it, I think about how it affect black people. How it affect black people. If it affect white people, oh well, I don't care. They can be affected. But how it affect black people was the concern of me when I listened to that video and when I heard it again, because I kind of had, because I've been listening to a few of them. But on that, I yield the mic.
So, Bakari, I appreciate that because I agree with you on many things. I think part of the problem is that, we recognize the evil of the European and what they've done to our people, right? So what happens is that if the European says something, we just gonna believe the opposite, right? And I think there's a lot of problems with that type of thinking. And I understand where it comes from. If the European is evil and everything they produce is evil, then we should be against it. And I understand that, but at the same time, I think that's lazy thinking, right? I do believe that we should be skeptical, but we should find out things for ourselves too. So, what I take issue is when you have these people who come on here and say, "Oh, who was it? The Kennedy guy, who's not a doctor. They put him in charge of the health service. He's not even a doctor, but he said something along the lines of black people be having a stronger immune system or something like that, and we don't need certain types of shots or whatnot, and You had people supporting that and not realizing that's the very basis of medical racism, that Black people have been denied pain medication because apparently we're stronger. We can take more. I remember, I had a doctor who told me that one time. His Black patients, they're up and about in a day or so, and it takes white people longer to recuperate. Did you ever stop think maybe Black people were also in pain? Maybe they had to go back to work. Maybe they didn't have the leave the white person had. And there's a lot of factors to that. But this is taught in medical school, right? And it's a lie. It's been disproven, but so many people want to cling to that lie. Look at what happened. I mean, we've started whole wars based off of lies. We know about the weapons of mass destruction that never existed, right? In Iraq too. But in the first Iraq war, talk about when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, they were taking babies out of the incubators and leave them in. That never happened. What else? Going all the way back to the Spanish-American War, right? And they knew it was a lie. They said the USS Maine had been destroyed by a Spanish torpedo, and they knew that it was a boiler explosion that blew up the ship. And even even in Vietnam, the whole thing about the Gulf of Tonkin. Oh, we came under attack by a Vietnamese boat. No, you didn't. But you lied as a justification to go to war with another group of people. Look what happened in Grenada. Oh, they lied about them spreading communism. They went in there and to overthrow the government. So the lies are easier to believe than the truth because it's easier to fool people. It's easier to tell people what they want to hear. So you can get a result from that. You want to be able to tell people. And what concerns me, like you were saying so much about the misinformation, because Black people, unfortunately, we are primed to believe absurdities. We've been indoctrinated so heavily through religion and through you know and through society that we're quick to believe things that aren't true, because again, we don't want to believe white people are evil. So white people say the sky is blue, I got it. It's green, right? If white people say we come from Africa, then we're really native. Like there's some great big grand conspiracy to keep that from us, right? So it's just frustrating when you have to deal with these certain individuals who would much rather believe lies than believe the truth, because the truth is very unpleasant, right? People don't want to be Black because it's hard to be Black, and I understand that it's hard to be Black. So that's all I want to add to that. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Black Steel. I just want to point out that I had asked Afro Native World in the chat. He mentioned that Marimba Ani had a great analysis of Plato, and he posted some clips from her writing, and I put them up on the screen. So if you listen to the playback, pay attention to it. I can't read all of them, but I think if what I quickly read from Afro Native World's excerpts, I think Jose kind of sums it up here as well. Jose says a human being must be conscious at any time. No, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong Jose quote. Hold on. Jose says my opinion about the video is that it hit me like a revelation. Heroes of our nemesis all make the human experience sinister, like Freud did, in my eyes. And I pick up I think that's what Marimba was saying in those excerpts that I posted, is that what Plato did here was kind of planted what's the term? Planted a thought in the head of these Europeans that was already there. I think he doubled down on it to teach them that what you do is just what it is to be human. And the question I want to follow up with and ask is, if we are the humans and they're the Neanderthals, what caused this defect in us where we accept whatever thing they say, whatever absurdity they start to push? What about it? And also, do we have any tools, present or past, that we could reach to kind of shield us from this type of thinking? Can we ever reverse this kind of thinking that this video is talking about based on Plato's work? I know I asked a lot there, but I think you guys get the idea. Anyone can answer at this point. I'm not going to call on anyone.
So, first of all, white people are not Neanderthals. I don't know where that came from. White people, they have Neanderthal DNA. But I don't believe white people are Neanderthals, right? I don't believe. I was
being telling you.
Yeah, white people's deficiency come from their culture, not from any genetic disposition they might have. I believe it comes from their culture, from there's an excellent book called Iceman's Inheritance, and also Sheikh Anta Diop talks about the African origin of civilization. That the roots of European culture can be traced directly to their evolution within a ice age culture, right? So I would not call white people, Neanderthals, but I would say that, to your point though, as far as because they currently, and we may not want to like this fact, but the European ideology dominates the world. Not the African ideology, but the European ideology dominates the world. So when we look at the world, we see it through the lens of the European, and look from the standards of beauty to the what's considered to be morals and what so on and so forth. Everything is done through a European lens, and that is a result of colonization. I truly believe that. I don't believe that as far as the tools to fight back against it, I think that is something that's something that we have to work on together. I think that we're doing a good job of pushing back against it. But I do think that the masses of, especially African people, excuse me, African people struggle with that because, of how effective the propaganda is. I had a student tell me one time, he didn't know white people could be poor, which blew my mind because most of the kids in our school are poor, but yet for some reason his mind he associated whiteness with luxury, whiteness with wealth, whiteness with intact families, right? Oh, the white man comes home with his kids every night and has dinner with his family. It is not, that is nothing that is inherently within white culture. But the propaganda is so strong that so many people believe that they associate that with whiteness, you know. So I think we have to do a better job as far as speaking up to the propaganda. But then also when you have a situation where the algorithm is controlled, you have much of the news filtered through the satellites and whatnot that's controlled by Europeans. I think that European. So Cheryl says in their nature. Again, I think it's their culture. I think it's the European. I think when I was a kid, my favorite story, one of my favorite stories was the Jungle Book, right? He took that little boy Mowgli, and he lived with the wolves in India and whatnot. I used to love that story. But he became a wolf in his mind. He thought he was a wolf. He was raised by the wolves, right? And I think if you were to take a white baby and you put that white baby with some sensible people, I think he would be okay, right? But I believe that because the European culture, their Sealy is so strong, right? I think that this is something that is reproduced within their culture over and over and over again. And we always talk about the deficiencies of Black culture, but we never look at the deficiencies of European culture. how Europeans could sit up here and go and commit genocide on every landmass on earth. You don't see that with no other people. But yet we can't look at that. They always want to talk about the high rates of crime within the Black community. Who leads in pedophilia? Who leads in rape? Who leads in all type of, sexual crime? It's the European. That what is happening with within their culture is producing these people. I think there's something needs to be said about that. I don't believe there's a genetic disposition to any type of criminality, but I do believe that culture can reproduce these things. But that's just my thoughts. I'll go ahead and let someone else speak. I'm pretty sure I'm about to get jumped, but that's okay.
That was good stuff. But real quick before anyone else goes, in the chat, Trigger Happy says, in my opinion, it's epigenetic. You can't talk about culture and forget how long they have been baked in such culture. I think Black people are afraid to admit that who they are dealing with have deep issues. That goes to Black Seal's point of looking at their culture a little bit. African World says that's genetic in a way because their environment made them that way. Cheryl had a lot to say. I want to throw to Cheryl in a second. I know Bakari wants to speak next. But Trigger says basically that the Amnea culture deals with despiritualizing the world around them. When you don't have that compass to fix the bad habits of your group, and you pass it down, it will stick. So with that said, I know Brother Bakari wanted to go. Brother Bakari, you go, and then Cheryl.
Okay, thank you. Well, Black Steel, first of all, I want you to remember at the end of that story, remember Wuggly saw the humans. He went back to being a human. So that little white kid gonna see some white folks and end up going back to be white. I just wanted to throw that out there. but anyway, when you say why do we fall for it, my opinion, if you look back through history and you study other people's cultures and you start looking just throughout history, violence always rules the way. Violence rules the way. The same way white people, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, the same way all those white people bowed down to Mongolians for a very long time because of how violent the Mongolians were. It's the same thing, except they did get up and they eventually fought. Now they did using Egyptian army, the Mamelukes, to Egyptian slave army, the Mamelukes, to help defeat the Mongolians, but it was violence that ruled. It was violence that had control over everything. Fear. In their sphere, I said at one time, I say the black man has turned cur. And that's not me speaking negative, right? I understand why. I understand the situation we've been in. I understand the fear. And I will tell you there's nothing wrong with being a little afraid. But you can't let your fear, you can't let your fear control you. You can't let it conquer you. You have to conquer the fear. So it's easy to get on their side. That's why some people would say they are not on their side, the indigenous people to America, but they are literally on their side. Because they say we Africans, and we gonna say we're not. In the slave trade was and the slave trade was done in reverse because uh these uh these white folk, these European folk said that they picked us up from, they enslaved Africans over here. So how do we get on their side? We get on their side by first we spread the lie and say Jesse Jackson thought of African American in 1988 or 89. which is not true. If you study history, you'll see black people call themselves African American. I really don't even have to go no further than Mary McLeod Bethune. We called ourselves African way before Jesse Jackson ever said that, and used the term African American way before Jesse Jackson was ever thought about. So we get on their side by denouncing African American. Now we just gonna say we're Black American. So now we have become what they have made us. They made us just be American. Forget your ancestors, forget all of that. This is where you're from. But they will tell you in a heartbeat that they're Irish, that they're British, a lot of times, or they're Scottish. And a lot of times they don't have to tell you. You see their last names and you know their ancestry. Even though they say they're American, they'll still say they're Scottish, they're Irish, they're all of that. But we just become Black Americans. So we have become what they want us to be. Run away from your ancestors, get rid of your revolutionary spirit, because they have beat that revolutionary spirit. They have beat that revolutionary spirit out of a whole lot of us. So now we're gonna follow the people who gonna say, cut the check, cut the check, cut the check. ADOS, we've been Americans ever since they brought us here on the slave ships, because when they brought us here on the slave ships in 1619, we were American, and then they enslaved Americans. But their records won't even say it was enslaved Americans, but it was enslaved Africans. But that's the mindset of our people, and that's how they keep control. And back to, that's how people like that will be an algorithm, and they will get a louder voice than yours, a louder voice than the sister on here, Cheryl, a louder voice than a Black Steel, right? A louder voice than ours. And people will gravitate to that. And we also believe, and I'm going to land my plane, and we also believe that if we get on that side, and let's just say Black American, and we don't say nothing about our ancestors, these white people, as the leader of ADOS said, Black people, we can't take care of ourselves, so we need to stop saying we going to separate and take care of ourselves, because if we could, we would do that. We have tried and failed. We need, her exact words, we need white people to take care of us. So if you following that type of mindset, right? So stop being African American, be a Black American, and be that proud, like the one guy say, I'm a proud Black American patriot. And eventually, white people will take, eventually, white people will take care of us, because we are their children now. I hear the mic.
Man, you just kind of blew my mind. Sorry about the noise in the background, hearing it, but you just blew my mind. I didn't know, as you call it, why that Cornell went that far. She went as far as saying that white folks need to take care of us because we can't take care of ourselves. My goodness, that whole side over there is insane. Insane. Anyway, I know Cheryl want to say something. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to say I do apologize for cutting in on Bakari when he was talking. That's my fault. I didn't mean to do that.
Cheryl, we
And
cool. You ain't got to apologize to me about that.
you
I'm
know, you
sorry. I
know,
don't mean to cut you off, but
it's
we
just
cool.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
ain't
I
got
feel
nothing
you.
but respect for you. We cool.
Yeah, yeah. I just didn't think it was right. I just got, I was getting tight. But you cool, you cool,
But
you good.
but thank you though.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I don't know who it was, but they were saying that the way white people are is cultural. So that's not wrong, right? That it is cultural, but it is also um historically it is also genetic because we are what our environment is. And when you've lived in a certain environment for so long. I mean, just look at animals. Like look at how they adapt to their environment. Their adaptation is what they do socially, but it's also genetic. It becomes genetic. They start to adapt. So the way white people are, it is genetic. It's genetic. They're tied to whatever lands they're in. They were in, and we're not talking about America, of course, because that's only been 400 years. But we're talking about 6,000, maybe 7,000 years. You're living in a land where it's not prosperous. The land doesn't doesn't yield much food. You're talking about climates that we would never, as African people, we never experience. We come from lands, even when you're in the desert. We're in harsh environments, but the environments provide for us in some way, form, or fashion. But you're talking about living in the freezing cold for 6,000 years. We're talking about living in mountains and all these types of things. And the way their environment, we might have similar things in that environment to the environments that we, um, for thousands of years, have come up in. Um, but their environments are unlike any type of environment we ever experienced as African people. We're not used to that. Even now, black people ain't used to the cold like that. If you're a healthy black person and you live in anywhere cold, you don't want to be there. You're there because some circumstance. I mean, we as a people, we're not used to that. So I just say that to say that genetics the environment plays a huge role in genetics. We can't dismiss that. So the way that a people are, if they're used to harsh environments, they're used to, I got to take what's mine, mine. They're used to individualism. Individualism has been a part of them. I mean, they've been scraping and scrambling for food and resources for thousands of years, and us not so much. Not so much. So you got that does play a significant role, and I'm not saying the cultural part doesn't, but if we're only saying, just think about it like this: if we're only saying that the culture plays a role in how white people are, that means if I take a white person and I put them in a black and I put them in a land of abundance, right? A land where it's not being colonized, a land where um, um, there's plenty of everything, there's plenty of resources and all of that going on. That means that they're not going to revert back to their old ways. They're just going to be great. They're just going to be great white people, and they're just going to live off the land and like, let's say we put them in South Africa, right? We put them in Tanzania, then that means that they're fine now. They're great because it's not white culture, right? But that's not the case because you cannot reverse 6 to 7,000 years of us being a certain way just from changing their culture in the present modern day. You can't reverse it like that. That's not how it works. It's in their nature to be a certain way. So yeah, maybe they kids and me. Oh, white kids. It just depends on how they grow up. If they grow up with some black kids, then they'll be fine. But when they reach adulthood and they start recognizing their own white politics, they're going to go to what they know because it's cultural and it's genetic because it's in their nature. So I mean, I agree and I disagree.
I just want to add real quickly. I'm so happy that I grew up around some consciousness, through my dad and like his brother and stuff like that. I grew up around some socialism too, by the way. But I'm so glad I grew up around that because I'm guessing that's what made me be able to kind of shield myself away from the Yvette Connells and stuff like that. Because what Afro Native World said in the chat a second ago, or a few short minutes ago, is completely mind blowing. He says Yvette Connell also said the end goal is becoming white.
I got you fucked up, Koku. That fucks you up.
Me completely up. Completely up, though. I am so happy I am immune to that nonsense. Could you imagine Shoot the Breeze being a ADOS and FBA talking piece? My goodness. My goodness.
Coco,
I am
at least if you turn white, you'll be able to take care of yourself.
I mean, this shit is crazy, but I like what Trigger Happy Act says. What he said, basically, the question entails this too: can we change white people? Some black people are scared of the prospect that we can't change white people, and other black people have come to terms with it. Afro-Native World to that said, that's what our anti-racist friends spend their energy and life on, trying to change them. And Trigger Happy, I had to read this one, guys. She says exactly, they don't want that bitter medicine of realizing they won't change.
White people can only change themselves, right?
Right.
So my belief is this. Now I echo what Kwame Ture says. If a white person wants to lynch me, that's his problem. But if he has the power to lynch me, that's my problem. I think what it is that we are vulnerable to white people's aggression, right? They can change. If they need to change their culture, they can change their culture themselves. But my issue is our vulnerability to their racism and to their dysfunctional culture. If they was off in the Caucasus Mountains doing their own thing, eating each other and beating each other in the heads with KWAZ, that's fine. But these people have nuclear weapons, so now it's our problem. That's so. My issue is not trying to change white people, but rather how do we reduce our vulnerability to their dysfunctional society? That's what I would say to that.
Yeah, that's kind of the question. What can we do to insulate ourselves against it? I think Bakari or Cheryl or someone want to say something.
Okay, when we were talking, how can you insulate yourself? And for me, it also come back to like what Black Steel and Cheryl and people in the chat was talking about, saying it's like it's their culture, it's part of their DNA. Like at this job, I go to work. It's like 6 people work in that office. 4 of them Urugos, 2 of them black. Then you got like 3 more Urugos in the back. Every Urugu bring their gun to work. Neither one of them black people. It's in their nature to be that way, right? So when you go out here and we driving the trucks, it's probably like 5 to 1 black who drive trucks, right? So out of the 5, I say out of the 5, 6 Urugus that work there, they drive the trucks. They all carry their gun with them everywhere they go in a truck. Well, when it comes to the black, it's 2, me and this lady named Carla. We are the only 2 that carry our guns everywhere. We are so, it's like some of our people are so comfortable. Man, they're going up in these mountains. They're going up in these, because sometimes to hold them at bay so they don't just have power over you all the time, sometimes you just got to put in your mind, I'm willing to do what they are willing to do. And when you out here and you going up in these mountains and you know how crazy these mountain white folks are, because the Urus that not from the mountains, they scared of the mountain white folks. They don't go to the mountain, but you going up there, going to work, delivering to these construction sites at 4 in the morning, ain't nobody there but you. And you ain't got nothing. I don't get it. But it's in their nature to keep that with them. Sometimes you're going to have to learn from the people that have dominated and controlled. And one of the things they have done to keep in your mind, to let you know they will hurt you. One of the guys, so I keep, and I let them know, I will hurt you. I keep mine. One of the guys in the office got to argue with one of the truck drivers there. The truck driver eventually quit. And he got to arguing, and he said something slick. And that brother went in his backpack and walked to his desk and said, I saw you reaching for your gun in your drawer. I got mine in my hand. Say another word disrespectful to me. Watch what happened in here. Because they wanted, guess what he did? He shut the hell up. About an hour later, guess what he did? I apologize for provoking you. Sometimes you got to let them know that you are willing to go as far as they're willing to go. And when blacks still talk about the nukes, I understand they got the nukes, and that's why I am disappointed in some of the African nations in all these years have not even tried to build a military to protect us. No countries haven't even tried to build a real military to defend itself, let alone send a threat across the water and say, if you do this to our folks, this is what gonna happen. Sometimes that's my take. You got to let them know I'm willing to do what you're willing to do. That's how I think you can stop some of it anyway. I get it, Mike.
I agree. If there's no last thoughts here, let's move on to shoot the breeze topic number 4 for time's sake. We're going to end at 11, thereabouts at least. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in tonight. Thank everyone who's in the chat. You guys have been pretty active, even though we are short-staffed on the panel tonight. Once again, shout out to Buana on his birthday. Should read something number 4 says, is one of these long ones that runs over. Should read something number 4 says, previously, this content creator made a salient point that time is cyclical within an African context and not necessarily linear. Many attacked her perspective as backward. Is she vindicated now? This is an interesting one. This came with quite a few links to it, so bear with me as we work our way through them. The first one is to this sister here. You guys, yes, you can see my screen. I'm going to play it, and then I'll progress through the other attachments right after.
What if I told you that for many traditional African societies, the idea of a linear, abstract, infinite future doesn't exist? And that the way we think of time, hours, the calendar, deadlines isn't natural but historical. It was learned, it was imposed, and in many ways it was colonized. I first got interested in this topic when I was making a short Instagram video about how the idea of African time is often associated with lateness or disorganization. And I wanted to show how this association isn't just ignorant or false, but it's actually epistemically violent. Because what's at stake isn't punctuality, it's the colonization of time itself. In her essay, A is for Africa, Towards the Decolonization of Knowledge Production, Ugandan activist Sylvia Tamale reminds us that before capitalist modernity, many societies, not just in Africa, tied their sense of time to the rhythms of life and nature. The sun, the harvest, the rain, the markets, the ceremonies, those were clocks. Time wasn't an empty container to be filled. It was relational, it was cyclical, it was event-based, and it was a lived experience. And when I read this, it made so much sense to me why when I'm planning something with a friend, we'll say we'll meet in the afternoon or the party will start in the afternoon. It doesn't matter whether the party will start at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. What matters is the event of it being the afternoon. Or if we say we're going to meet at sunrise, it doesn't matter whether the sun will rise at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. What matters is the event of the sun rising. This idea that time isn't universal but culturally shaped has been explored by many African philosophers, most influentially by John Mbiti, the Kenyan theologian who in 1969 wrote the book African Religions and Philosophy, which I actually have right here. I have 2 of his books actually. And Mbiti proposed that for many traditional African worldviews, time is made up of events, what has happened, what is happening, and what is about to happen. And he called these dimensions Sasa, the now, the recent past, and the near future, and Zamani, the vast, endless past where all events eventually go on to settle. In other words, time isn't an independent line stretching endlessly into the future. It's something that people create and experience through action, through events, through community, through ceremony, and through ritual. But it's also important to understand where Mbiti was writing from. Because Mbiti was a theologian, he was studying the relationship between man and God. So when Mbiti says traditional African thought has virtually no future, he didn't mean that they weren't thinking about tomorrow. He meant that meaning, morality, and spirituality are grounded in the here and now, not in a distant heaven to be hoped for or hell to be feared. In that sense, time and faith are lived experiences, not deferred promises. And there's something that I forgot to say. I made a similar video like this a few months ago for my Instagram. But what I forgot to say here is that the point really, of course, isn't whether Mbiti got it right or wrong, but the main takeaway is that time is event-based, it's cyclical, and it's communal. And African traditional societies were some of the best planners because they realized something fundamental, that the golden age doesn't exist in an abstract future, but it already exists in Zamani. So things like death, inheritance, the changing of seasons, the coming and going of generations, empires, those are things that have already happened and they exist in Zamani. So we know that they must happen again. And so that's why we dream, we aspire, we plan, and we hope. So I just wanted to say that. Something else to note is that when we say African time, we're of course not taking Africa as a single story, but Mbiti himself gives a disclaimer and says that his work is meant as a general survey, using both general observation across Africa while giving specific illustrations that he mentions. It's also not possible to give an overview of all of Mbiti's work in one video, so I would just definitely recommend for you to read his work for yourself. But of course, Mbiti's work didn't go unchallenged. This idea of African perceptions of time is something African philosophers have been debating, questioning, critiquing, and expanding ever since. So I want to give a small literature review of what happened after Mbiti. So we start in the 70s and 80s. Henry Odera Oruka, through his Sage Philosophy project, argued that Mbiti relied too heavily on proverbs and ethnography. He said philosophy should also be found in critical reasoning, not just in collective culture. Kwasi Wiredu argued that Africa is too plural for one model to represent everyone. And Kwame Chechi, writing about the Akan in Ghana, showed how people use both linear and cyclical time, not as opposites, but as overlapping. So the question shifted from what is the African concept of time to how many concepts are there and how do they work? Then we moved to the 90s and the 2000s. In 1996, Kibujo Kalumba and John English published a book revisiting Mbiti's ideas. In 2005, Kibujo Kalumba wrote an article called A New Analysis on Mbiti's Concept of Time, and this was meant to defend Mbiti from some of the criticisms and say that event-based time can still make philosophical sense. It's not primitive or backward, it just reflects the reality that time doesn't exist without the events that give it life. Meanwhile, in On the Post-Colony, Achille Mbembe showed how time is actually entangled. The capitalist present, colonial past, and uncertain futures all overlap in often very messy ways. And later, feminist scholars added a crucial element, that time itself is political. Who gets to rest? Who gets to dream of a future? Who is stuck waiting and who is allowed to move forward? Those are questions of power, not just chronology. So where does that leave us? Clearly, we can see that over many years and decades, the conversation of African temporality has kept on evolving. And honestly, the point isn't really whether Mbiti got it right or wrong. It's just to remind us that the Western linear model of time isn't the only one. There are other ways to tell time, through memory, through experience, through the slow unfolding of a story. So temporal disobedience is my way of exploring these alternatives. Temporalities that breathe instead of rush, remember instead of forget, and loop instead of climb. So I really believe the revolution is epistemic because it's not just about what we know, but also how do we know what we know. And if this video resonated with you, then I hope you'll come on this journey of temporal disobedience with me. We'll be exploring themes like Swahili time, prophecy, art, memory, and so much more. So asante kwa kutazama.
That was a good discussion. I like the fact, like Afro Native World in the chat said, he was putting us on to some continental writers. Some of them I'm familiar with, actually, too. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with them as well. The next attachment takes us to X. It says, how many times, this is from Ebonically Intelligent Papi. It says, how many times is science going to spend 500 years validating indigenous belief systems assertions while barring them people from participating or benefiting in any way? Someone, Seo, the succulent, comes and says, like, it's so jarring. There's another attachment that takes us to X again. Make sure you guys can see my screen. It says, in a new quantum experiment, scientists saw something that challenges everything we think we know about time. This is from Shining Science, by the way. Instead of flowing forward like a river, time seemed to loop and fold back on itself. Particles behaved as if their future could affect their past, blurring the line between cause and effect in ways that defy ordinary understanding. This strange behavior has observed through quantum entanglement, a phenomenon where two particles remain mysteriously linked, no matter how far apart they are. When scientists changed how they measured one particle, it seemed to alter the history of its partner retroactively. It's as if, quote unquote, now and quote unquote then exist together, constantly reshaping each other in a single connected moment. The findings hint that time may not be a one-way path, but a flexible structure that bends and connects distant events. Your choices don't rewrite your past, but on a quantum level, the universe might not follow the rules of linear order at all. Reality could be straighter than we've ever imagined. There is, let me see if there's more to it. So this is just an image about the new quantum research suggesting time doesn't move forward, but folds onto itself, meaning your present actions might already be reshaping your past. Let me just leave that image right there while I grab the last link to this to the previous topic. This last link is also going to take us to X. Let me share my screen. This is a tweet from Damien. Hold on a second. My audio went out. Give me a second. So this is a tweet from Damien on X. Let me just make sure you guys can see it. It says, quote unquote, new quantum research. This is a comment to that tweet I just read a second ago. Let me blow this up. So he is looking at, if I'm not mistaken, this is from Bakongo Cosmology. I forgot the name of the concentric circles with the cross in the middle now. If someone in the chat can remind me, actually, maybe it's over here. Someone says, I had no idea Congo cosmology was basically the same as Igbo. And then Damien says, it's observed all across the world the concept of as above, so below, and cycles of life, time. Different cultures just have different expressions of it. When translated, it's fairly similar, if not the same. So as I remember, this line going across on the horizon here represents the river, and it's a connection between the living world, I think, is above, and the spirit world. Yeah, that's right. It says right here. It's a connection between the physical world and the spiritual world. It's interesting. I put up a post recently asking about hoodoo and any resources you have. So if you guys check out that post and give me your resources on understanding hoodoo. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the Congo cosmology shows up in hoodoo as well. If I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me. The other image was Yeah. So the other image is a sketch of the Igbo cosmology, where basically you have, well, they don't have the cross like they have in the other Congo cosmology. That's not the cross, but in the Igbo, they do have the upper over the lower, the human world over the spirit world, and you could see how there's this cycle of life and death, right? Death, first burial, second burial, third burial, you become an ancestor, you're reborn, boyhood, puberty, adult, old age, and right back to death and through the process again. So, the main notion here, though, is that people didn't believe that this time thing was cyclical. And here comes white folks late to the party again. Now telling us, yeah, this stuff we think it might not be linear as we thought before. Perhaps it is cyclical. So what do we have to say about folks not really believing in our science? Let me start with Sister Cheryl on this one. Cheryl, what's it?
Oh, I just wanted to hear like some of the other panelists' opinions first before responding.
All right, let me go to Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts on that is it just made me think about I had I was listening to I was watching a thing when Erica Badu had got her DNA test, and she was Fulani, and she was like, this is why they say I'm always late, but I'm not late. But if you talk to some people that still believe and practice African traditions, there's no such thing as being late. As long as you like late for work and stuff like that, as long as you have enough time in a day to do your job. Being late for something, that's being late. That's what they told me. They said that's the white people's concept that you are late. If they tell you to be to work at, let's say hypothetically, I'm just speaking of work, tell you to be there at 6:00, right? But but they want you to stay to 4:00, but you finish your job by 11:00, right? So that's 5 hours. Why do you have to come in? So as long as you have enough time in the day to do your job, as long as you have, because their time is going to keep going. There's no need for that. That's what when I saw this video, that's what I thought about. That's literally what I thought about when I saw this video. I heard Africa Badu said when she did her dinner, but then I have African buddies that said the same thing to me about time, and that's what I thought about. Yeah, the mic.
All right, appreciate that, Brother Bakari. In the chat, Trigger Happy says, now imagine a culture that doesn't have this as a concept. They leave their ancestors behind. The wisdom of their ancestors is primitive. The wisdom of their ancestors is primitive, and they swiftly go through the present to a limiting future. He said that's why many European cultures have a sort of apocalyptic, and many evangelical Christians are addicted to the idea. By the way, shout out to Ike and Fire, who's in the chat. He says today will ultimately be the past, and that's how we can use today and the future to change the past. Afro-Native world coming through. He tells me that the river that is the dividing line and that cross of the Congo cosmology is called the Kenga. I'm pretty sure me and Black Steel actually, when we had the book club, we covered a book, Fighting for Honor, that covers some of that cosmology as well. So I appreciate that. Black Steel, what say you to what you just saw about time? Maybe you were one of the folks who was dissenting against the African sister's views of time? What say you now?
I was never dissenting, but I was a little confused. However, the world we live in, black people don't know nothing. Unfortunately, if you let some people tell it, black people don't know anything. We're primitive. So this whole idea of black people in time being a cycle, it doesn't count until white people discover it, right? So that's why nobody really cared. But she's not wrong though. You know, understanding it is makes more sense now. But it's really just a matter of people just not taking acknowledging the genius of African people. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is that the idea that African people have their own view of reality, their own connection to the cosmos, and not only just to that, but into the realm of the spirit. Um, that's just not going to, you know, fly in the modern scholarly, scientific published works, so on and so forth. Um, and only until they discover that it starts to make sense, right? So it's kind of like, if African people do something to, have a method of doing something, that method is automatically primitive until white people discover, oh, I guess I did the right way. Then they take all the credit for it. So, but I think she's been. I mean, I don't think she needed their vindication. She didn't need them to say she was right. Sis knew what she was talking about. Even if we didn't pick up what she was putting down. Eventually, um, the reality comes out, and the truth is, she knew exactly what she was describing. So I respect that. Um, it's just, I think it is because we're so used to thinking in a certain way. It is hard to kind of grasp it, but I think with time, um, it'll start to come naturally to us. Especially when she says it's based on the seasons and just living in the moment. I think that we don't realize how much has been taken from us until we start to, have people who break this stuff down to us, and how much, even the European themselves, they used to have, things like this until it was stamped out via Christianity. And they've tried to stamp it out within us too as well. But we fought back. I think that's something to be very proud of. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Black Steel. With that said, Sister Shirley, you ready to give your response?
Yeah, so this is gonna sound kind of weird, but one time I had got this job, right? I was working for the VA, and during orientation, they had us do all these like cognitive exercises. I don't know. I guess it's just one of those things they just had us do just to, I don't know. I don't know why they did it, but for some reason they had us examine shapes, and they would ask us like, okay, what do you think of when you see a line? What do you think of when you see a circle? And everybody got like different shapes or whatever. And this white guy got a line, and he says, well, when I think of a line, I think of time. And he said, because, months in a day. And it got to me, and I was like, well, this was years ago. So I was like, when I think of a circle, I saw a circle. So I was like, when I think of a circle, I think of how the circle of life. That's how I described it. I didn't really go into detail. I was just like, I just think of the circle of life. And everybody stopped and just looked at me like I had a foot growing out of my head or something. Like, it was just kind of funny. But it's just, I feel like just looking back at that in retrospect, just how Western society, they truly believe like when you dead, you dead. Time, when the time is done, it's done. It's not coming back. Nothing repeats. And that's generally how people think. And I just like I just think like for me, I've always seen things that way. Even before I could really articulate it, it's always been the circle of life. It's everything is in a circle. I mean, you look at atoms down to the basic chemistry. If you're like really into science, everything is cyclical. You know, every geography, everything that happens physically on the earth is everything is physical. Everything even in the universe is everything's in a cycle or in a circle. So I just that's just how I see things. So I see I mean it just I feel like it just goes to show you how badly religion has gotten us. And and it's cultural. It's extremely cultural. And but I feel like in America we're in the point where we don't we don't see we're not even thinking like that. To be honest, we're not even because to them that's deep. That's too deep to be thinking that way. But I just had to recall that particular experience I had because I thought that was very interesting. And just people are, you know, Europeans, Western society is just straight. They don't think anything happens. It's like it's kind of like how when they first believed the earth was flat and when you go to the edge you just fall off. Just linear. That's very linear. They're linear in their thinking. So that's how they are.
Appreciate that, Sister Sure. You know, one of the things all y'all responses is kind of showing me and reminding me is that, you know, it's in the DNA, man. It's that these ideas and stories and stuff is there, but we gotta tap into it. And I think that's where the spirituality uh, argument comes in all the time. We gotta tap because that's a spiritual thing, right? That your ethnogenesis is a spiritual thing as much as it's a genetic thing, and we gotta tap back into that. Trigger IP 262 mentions within African cosmogony, life starts with a spiraling mass, and that spiraling mass comes from a seed or egg, or whatever circle-like shape is articulated. This shape can be seen everywhere. In Africa, he says you can see the circle and spiral everywhere in nature too. Yeah, I was reading something recently that was showing because this guy, which one was it? Watson from Watson and Crick, who they claim discovered the arrangement of DNA when really a Jewish woman really did a lot of that work actually. And there's rumors that they actually stole that from this other guy, Linus Pauling, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, there's some evidence and some pictures I saw some years ago where like it seemed like Africans understood that DNA was spiral. And it's kind of funny. Also, that idea about the seed and all that. If you listen to a lot of African stories of the creation, it basically sounds like the Big Bang. It's just like a seed or something that got some kind of sphere that got filled with pressure. The pressure started to push outwards, expanded, shot off these projectiles, and these projectiles is what became. These projectiles did the same, and this is what now is the planets and whatnot and stars. So it's an interesting thing, but it's in the DNA. We just gotta tap into that, man. Is any last thoughts on this problem, by the way? All right, y'all do me a favor. Let me do the Shoot the Breeze topic number 5 so I could clean the slate between last week and this week. Let's go to the last topic of tonight. Shoot the Breeze topic number 5 says, Halo Braid, the first robotic hair braiding robot. It's about time we make inroads into controlling the black hair industry. That's an interesting title. Takes us to YouTube. Let me make sure my audio is working. It should be. It's a short, so I might play it more than once just to make sure we get the gist of it.
I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything
Oh. It
Neither
must have
do I.
happened. It must have happened again. Okay, my bad. Hold on. Give me 1 second. See, I wouldn't know. So until I come back to this screen, and even now I don't see it. But in any event, like I said, it's a short video. Can you guys see it? Can you guys see it on screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right. Let me play it, and then we'll discuss it.
President's Innovation Challenge, a major recognition for cutting-edge startups. They've already built more than 450 prototypes and are now opening a waitlist for stylists and salons around the world.
Making braiding joyful, not painful, and allowing a stylist to grow their business without destroying their hands.
Think about it. Braiding is one of the oldest art forms in the world, a skill passed down through generations, rooted in our identity and culture. Now, technology is stepping in to support, not replace, our stylists, saving time, protecting hands, and maybe even changing the salon game forever.
Our devices have done thousands of braids and braided full hairstyles like mine for the past year. And we use machine learning to match professional quality, but to do it 5 times faster.
Let's talk in the comments. What do you think about this invention? Is it good or bad for the hair braiding industry? Will it empower African braiders or disrupt traditional businesses? A robot that braids hair in seconds is almost here, my people.
Imagine if every time you got your hair cut, it took 6 hours, cost $200 to $300, and gave your hairstylist arthritis at age 29. This is what it's like to get your hair braided.
2 Nigerian Harvard grads are pioneering something that could disrupt the $500 million hair braiding industry.
And when I braided my own hair for the first time, it took me 4 days.
Founders Yinka Ogunbiyi and David Afolabi have built a robot, that's right, that can braid hair in seconds.
But I'm not alone, because hair braiding is now the most popular hairstyle for 20 million Americans who experience this miserable process every 8 weeks. And yet braiding hasn't seen innovation since braiding was invented 5,000 years ago. That's why we're building Halo Braid, the first patent-pending hair braiding robot. Stylists start the braid, Halo finishes it, and we reduce braiding time from hours to minutes.
Now, if you ever sat in that chair for 6, 7, even 8 hours to all day getting your braids done, you already know this right here could be a game changer. Their startup, Halo Braid, just won Harvard President's Innovation Challenge, a major recognition for cutting-edge startups. They've already built more than 450 prototypes and are now opening a waitlist for stylists and salons around the world.
Making braiding joyful, not painful, and allowing a stylist to grow their business without destroying their hands.
Think about it. Braiding is one of the oldest art forms in the world, a skill passed down through generations, rooted in our identity and culture. Now, technology is stepping in to support, not replace, our stylists, saving time, protecting hands, and maybe even changing the salon game forever.
Our devices have done thousands of braids and braided full hairstyles like mine for the past year. And we use machine learning to match professional quality, but to do it 5 times faster.
Let's talk in the comments. What do you think about this invention? Is it good or bad for the hair braiding industry? Will it empower African braiders or disrupt traditional businesses? A robot.
So again, my apologies for the first time we tried to watch that video. I didn't know the sound was off, but I think you guys got to see it a couple times now and can formulate an opinion. I'll be interested to hear from the chat from those of you who are still tuned in. But real quick, in the comment section under this video, it says, "There we go again. African duo inventing what none had done before. Bravo to you, Nigerian duo, for proving we African can innovate even better given the opportunity." Someone else says, "Damn, robot's going to braid hair and give you a facelift at the same time. Braids going to be tight ASF." Someone says, "Please don't sell it no matter the price offered. Think legacy and generational pride and wealth. Stop the African diaspora brain drain that makes colonizers rich off of our talents, skills, and gifts." Thank you. That's just a couple of the comments under the video. I was going to go to Brother Bakari, but it looks like Bakari left. So let me start with Black Steel. Black Steel, what are your thoughts on this new technology?
Man, we got to be careful with this stuff, man. Because I feel like if used properly, it can be a benefit. But if we don't control it, then it'll put a lot of people out of business. And that's the problem with AI. AI has the potential to make people's lives much easier. Automation has the potential to, you have to work less hours and still be productive. But in the hands of the capitalists, what they'll do is they'll use as a way to get rid of the worker, because that means you don't got to pay nobody. So if it stays within our people, it can make the braiders lives easily, yes. But man, we got to be careful with this, because the minute the corporations get a hold of it, they'll, just like with the automated, talking about the automated trucking, right? That could destroy the entire truck driving industry. And this is something that has the potential to do that as well. But again, we have to be aware that this is being used by us for us. The minute we let them get a hold of it, it's going to put a lot of shops out of business. They'll put 2 or 3 machines in this thing in a storefront in the mall somewhere, and there's no braiders in there. I don't see any. I don't see this being good in the wrong hands. In the right hands, it's a benefit. In the wrong hands, this could be a disaster. So I just want to be, cognizant of that. It could definitely benefit, but it can also hurt too.
I agree. My computer starts to slow down, so I want to pause the share screen in a second. But Cheryl in the chat earlier said, "Oh, hell no." She said, "Until white people's capitalism, we haven't needed any innovations in hair braiding." Trigger Happy said, It's interesting that this topic essentially connects to the previous. As long as they don't sell the invention and keep it amongst Black people and commerce, this is great." Jose is still with us in the chat. He says it's probably just like a hand drill or hand saw. Yeah, I imagine some kind of crank thing too as well when I heard it, but it could be a computer. It could be a robotic thing, like a computer type thing. But Bakari says he had to step down, but he's still listening. Appreciate that. Brother Bakari. Cheryl, you've seen everything everyone else had to say. What say you to it?
Oh boy. Okay, so I mean, hair is very sacred, right? Black people, while we may be confused about a lot of things, we will never, I don't know too many black people that would allow an Asian person or a Hispanic person or someone who is not black to touch their hair. So I can't imagine that, like, worldwide black people would allow this, allow a robot to touch their hair. I just don't see it. I just, because it's something about when people touch your hair, it's a spiritual thing. And to let a robot, let alone a robot, touch your hair. Now, I'm sorry. So, all of the times I've sat in a hair, all of the times I've sat in an African store to get my hair braided, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I would never, if I wouldn't let a white person touch my hair, I would damn sure wouldn't let no damn robot touch my hair. All it take one little malfunction. Oh no, no ma'am, no sir. Oh no. At least I know with a person, ain't gonna be no malfunctions. If she get tired, her hands just get tired. She stop, and somebody else take over. All right, and that's from personal experience, from someone who used to get their hair braided all the time. There's absolutely no way, no way, because there's a 0% chance of any malfunction if it's an actual person touching my hair. Whereas there's like a maybe a 20% chance that robot malfunction and snag my hair. I'll be ready to knock that robot head off, and that's no lie. But I can see why they're doing it. They're doing it because they're trying to save time because they want to make more money. But I don't know if it's worth it. It's creative, points for creation, low creativeness, but it's hilarious to me. Honestly, it's hilarious. If I saw a white person in the mall getting their hair braided by a robot, I would die of laughter. Like, I would be crying. I would, like, yeah, like it reminds me of that is not something that black people in the US is going to do. I'm sorry. It's a great idea, but to make more money. So I mean, I see it on a serious note. I see it, but it's nah, sir. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Do y'all think when the post was created that the poster was thinking this is good because these two black people from Nigeria will make money? Yeah, and if so, would you say that's short sighted? That we just look at the money making potential, but we don't think about a couple of the concerns you guys had, like Cheryl just talking about the sacredness of hair in African tradition, or to even talk about like the community aspect of, like, you go to a hairdresser or a barber shop, like, yeah, like, what's next? They go have robots giving you a taper, like, you go to these places too for the community of it. That's a part of passing the time. Um, so are we sometimes too short sighted when we think it's a money come up versus it destroying some of our traditions and stuff like that? Anyone can answer.
Yeah, we're very short sighted. That's this. I mean, they're looking at money. They're seeing, how much how much money can I make, in a short amount of time. If I have these robots, I don't have to worry about a person stopping to rest their hands. But when she said, well, I can't remember exactly how she said it. She said, "Well, we can save a lot of hands you know, in the process of hair. Oh, please. That was the dumbest excuse ever. I think it was a disingenuous excuse. Like, oh, there are so many African people whose hands are mangled from braiding hair. Oh no. Like, that's what it felt like. But the only part of that that made sense to me was the economic part. That's the only part. And this is Nigeria we're talking about. They're about their money. They're about that paper. Okay, so I mean, that's what it's about.
I appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. All right. That's the show for tonight. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me a little past the closing time. But before you guys do leave, I'd like you guys to give you shout outs for the week. Shout out anything positive that would have happened to you or happened in the Black world this week. Let me start with Sister Cheryl. What would you like to shout out this week?
Um, Shoot. um, I guess shout out to all the people who I don't know who has a federal job or whatever, like, just bringing attention, not really a shout out, but just to bring attention to like people who, government's been shut down for almost 40 days now. A lot of people are kind of, I won't say, some people are struggling, some people are, kind of in a funk because, government shut down. They still have to go to work even, and they're not getting paid. So I mean, just to bring attention to that, and hopefully, for them that government opens back up so they can get back to their jobs, make money, and do all of that stuff. So I just wanted to bring attention to that because I kind of feel for people who gotta unfortunately go through this hard time because it is a hard time for a lot of people. So yeah, just wanted to bring attention to that.
Appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Let me see if Black Steel is there. Would you like to shout out this week, Black Steel?
I'm still here. Yeah, let me think. Man, shout out to Rockstar Games pushing Grand Theft Auto back another year, another 6 months. So we got to wait till November instead of May. So I'm kind of devastated about that. I swear this game is never gonna come out, man. I'm crying inside. But yeah. Also, there was a in my city there was a police chase that ended up basically going through a major populated area and killed 4 people. So shout out to the victims in that, and also that UPS plane that crashed that killed about 13 people, especially a man and his granddaughter. And it's things are looking bad out here. All we got is each other, black folks. We got to lean on each other because we all we got, and we all we need too. So let me just say that we always say we all we got, but we all we need too. So shout out to the people who lost their loved ones, and everything.
Appreciate that, Black Steel. Cheryl says LOL at the GTA. Yeah, I hadn't heard that news. I'm sure a lot of people is going through it. Let me check on my son and them too.
Man, I put in for the day off, man. I took a personal day. Now it's just gone to waste. Like, what are they doing? I'm so upset.
That's funny as hell. Trigger Happy says, shout out to all the great commentators pointing out the looming invasion of Nigeria by America. So many people caught it quickly what the goal is. Shouts out to the AES too for meeting African diaspora. So Jose says, shout out to 419. I'm not certain what 419 is. But that's the show for this week, man. Short staff, but I think we still held it down, had a great conversation. We'll be back, or we ought to be back. We should be back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure bring a friend and enjoy the show with us all. You know the deal too. Join the Discord. Post up your Shoot the Breeze topics. Add an attachment, and your topics will be discussed on Shoot the Breeze as well. All right, guys. I'll talk to you next week. You guys be good. Be African. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.